We will call the meeting to order, and we will ask Jamin to come and do the invocation for us.
Ready? You will. Bow your heads. Father, thank you for this beautiful spring morning. And Father, we just thank you for the chance to watch the sun rise once again. Father, as you know, we are gathered here today to conduct business for this wonderful county of Davie. Father, I pray for those presenting here today. May their words be clear and understanding. And Father, I pray for the commissioners as the leaders, as they listen to the suggestions given here this morning. Guide their hearts and minds to make the best decisions for the citizens of this great county. Bless this county, Father, and the many who call it home. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jamin. Thank you for all you and your staff and the tax department do, too. Thank you. Now we'll call on Brad Blackwelder to lead us in the pledge.
Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for all you do for the citizens of Davie County. We will now take a motion to adopt the agenda. Motion. Mr. Renninger, do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Finney, any questions? Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. All right, Mr. Barnett.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First on our agenda tonight is Paul Moore to discuss the policy change in recreation and parks. Good question.
All right, let's move on.
We'll move on to Robin's financial report.
Good morning. We are comparing on this report April year-to-date versus April year-to-date last fiscal year. As you can see, we are have a little bit more property tax than we did last fiscal year. Sales tax is basically flat, pretty much the same. That's a trend we're seeing across the state, that it's flat to a little bit of a decrease than prior fiscal years. Definitely not the increases we were seeing during COVID and all of that. So total revenues were about $250,000 more than we were last fiscal year. We have about $2.3 million more of expenditures. That's just for, increases in salaries, increases in things that, we're paying for. So last fiscal year, as you recall, we had our last amount of the American Rescue Plan funding of the $5.5 million. That's why there's such a dramatic difference from the prior year. And keep in mind, we added about $6 million to fund balance last fiscal year. Here is a chart of revenues. So the bar is the current fiscal year, the yellow line is last fiscal year, and the green line is fiscal year 23. So we're pretty close. You can see property taxes are higher. We have just differences in timing of intergovernmental revenues and charges for services. So let me know if you have any questions.
Robin, at what point, I know this is April that
Yes.
we're looking at here. At what point can you give us a basic estimate of what you think we'll put in fund balance at the end of this budget?
Well, right now we have $3.3 million more than we did, more of revenues than expenditures right now. So it's kind of hard to say. I had a pretty good crystal ball before COVID, but since COVID, estimates are a little bit different than they used to be. So for right now, we'll probably be pretty close to, 0 to just a little bit is probably what I'm thinking right now. So we'll just have to keep an eye on it in the next couple of months. We've cut off spending, mid-April, I think it was, so hopefully a lot of the larger dollar amounts are going away as far as spending goes, but we have things that we always have to pay for, like to keep the lights on and employees and all of that kind of thing. So, hopefully, those will wrap up a little bit, so we'll
Thank you.
just keep going, and next month we'll talk about May. We'll have a little bit better picture then, so.
Other questions? Thank you so much, Robin. We appreciate all y'all do. All right, now, our partners at the Davie County Schools, Ms. Haynes, the interim superintendent, is going to make that presentation. And Dr. Belcher, we welcome you. I know Ms. Haynes will introduce you. We are so happy you're here.
All right, good morning, Chairman Jones, Commissioners, Mr. Barnett, staff, and guests. We are thrilled to be here. I am stepping in as interim, kind of wearing two hats at this point, and I have with me Clay Harris, our Chief Operations Officer, and together we'd also like to introduce Dr. Heath Belcher, who is our incoming superintendent. He'll be starting with us in July and is working on getting moved to Davie County in the month of June. So we're excited about having him on board, and I know that you all are looking forward to building a relationship with him. Thank you for inviting us to share some information with you today. Mr. Harris has already submitted the budget as well as Mr. Wallace's budget summary last week, but we always appreciate the opportunity for dialogue, so thank you for having us. I will begin and maybe echo something that Benita said just a few minutes ago. We are blessed to be in Davie County. We're blessed in so many ways, and we have so many things to be proud of. And so as we begin, I'll comment with just some sampling of pictures that you see on this first slide to highlight some of the many positive things that are going on in our schools. First of all, you'll see in the top left, Coolamy Elementary School had its first ever school-wide showcase, and that was for students to show how they lead, shine, and sing. Those were the things that they were focused on May 1st. And we had hundreds of people who visited that campus that day, and they toured throughout the day. In the bottom left, you will see a photo from our annual Art Smart Festival, and that was held over Mother's Day weekend at the community park, as well as the Mebane Education Center. And that featured student performers and artists from all of our schools in Davie County, and that was just a huge celebration. In the bottom right, this is one of many achievements at Davie County High School, but I want to highlight our FFA group competed at the North Carolina Spring Dairy Show, and they brought home state champions, including a champion judging team and the highest scoring individual in the state. So I want to brag on them a little bit. We have a really strong CTE program, as you all know, and my son really benefited from his work in ag science and FFA. And then the top right, of course, that's the ultimate goal. As we approach graduation, we have early college graduation tomorrow morning at the Brock, and then we have Davie High's graduation coming up on June 14th. So we look forward to celebrating those students and their families, as that's a huge milestone. Before I turn it over to Mr. Harris to really focus on the budget overview, I do want to say that we do not take our fiscal responsibility lightly. Clay, his finance team, our directors, principals, bookkeepers, everyone involved really works hard to make sure that we are managing our funds carefully. And of course, there are difficulties. We have to prioritize and watch our spending. But again, I say we are blessed, and I am very grateful that we are not in panic mode as we are approaching payday in May or the end of this fiscal year. So again, we are blessed, but we don't take that lightly. And I'm going to kick things over to Mr. Harris to give a little bit of overview.
Commissioners, I will let you know, I think we have in your notebook, I think you have the PowerPoint here. We weren't made aware of that, but it's there if you want to follow. Thank you.
What I provided here is it's a prototype report. This is a report that was requested by the State Board of Education as well as the General Assembly, given a lot of publicity in the last few weeks. This talks about the financial health of a district. And so I asked them if they could send just a snippet of ours. It's not something that's been published yet. But the key things when you take a look at this, it really looks at your unassigned fund balance, how are you doing against that, as well as your expenditures from your funding sources, federal, state, and local. Key things they're looking at is, do your expenses kind of correlate to as the year goes and as things have grown? Are you pretty consistent in where you are? Are your expenses dropping in one area and rising in another? As you can see, we've got a very healthy financial report as we take a look at it, where we're going, and we pride ourselves on that. So as we work through that, a couple things from a fund balance perspective, our attorneys always give us accolades on where we are given the balance of our fund balance, as well as how we've done against our expenses. So this is a prototype that will come out. It'll be available probably in the next few weeks or whatever for people just to be able to kind of process where we are and how we're doing.
Clay, do you need to highlight the local spending? I'll go back to that just a second, just because that number does represent
yeah.
our Fund 8.
The local spending, when you take a look, we were right at $14 million from the county. That's what y'all appropriated for us. It's a total of 17.2. That's actually our local that you provide, as well as our Fund 8, which is our special operations. So that's community foundation. That's any grants that we get. They're specific for a purpose. So if you were to take a look at that and say, why is that number higher than what we allot? That's the reason for that. Thank you. We take a look at just local. I'm talking about your appropriations that come to us. Our local budget grew by about 3.7% between this year and what we're forecasting for next year. Salaries and benefits grew by about 5.6%. Personnel costs will be 75.3% of our local budget. Compare that to 22 when it was 71.3%. So a little, we continue to watch that, what I'll call on our radar, where we are. As personnel costs continue to go up, we just have to kind of keep an eye on that and know where we are as we work towards that. The capital outlay piece, which is another part that you fund us through sales tax, grew by 9.7%. That has to do with the termination of the Ellis payment. This year will be the last year for that. And then historically, we've seen about $40,000 growth in sales tax based on Ms. West's presentation. We'll need to keep an eye on that for next year and where we are and how we're growing from that perspective. Facility maintenance is part of what's in that capital piece. We have aging infrastructure. Just as an example, we had 3 HVA fatal failures in the last 2 months that we've had to go in and fix in 3 of our schools, and so we're working through that. But overall, from a financial health of the district, we've got strong performance. We're happy with where we are. Our interlocal agreement makes that so very, that's key to our success. We thank you for that. We do make monthly reviews of our budget. We always look to build a budget that's zero-based so that we don't roll over expenses from year to year and say, okay, this is where you were this year. What do we need to add? We take a look at what do you need and go from there. And that's one of the reasons we're that way. And as I stated, we've had minimal impact to fund balance as we continue to look at and work towards that. So thank you. Funding, we talked a little bit about funding in arrears. That's how the state funds us. It's based on the previous year's ADM. That's new for us this year. And we'll continue to work through that. Our ADM projection is not that different, so we should have little change due to ADM. We do have change related to charter schools. They're growing faster than traditional schools, so that impacts the state money that we get. Property tax from the county plays a part in our funding formulas as well, particularly around our low wealth. That's worth about $500,000 for us as we take a look at that and keep a close eye on what we're doing in the county with property tax. That will drive part of our funding as well. Talk about the programs. Our Exceptional Children's Program, we're funded at 13%. Currently, we've identified about 17.5. So there's a cap at 13. They won't fund any more than that. Just to lay perspective, last year in '24, the additional money we had to put in from a local and state was almost $2.1 million to support those students. Money well spent, investments, what we need to do, but just information so people understand kind of what the impact is. Go to the opposite end of the spectrum, our academically and intellectually gifted. We're funded at a cap of 4%. We have 15% identified. we've had an impact of about $140,000 outside of just what we're funded that we've got to take a look at. And I give you both state and local, because if I move state funding to do this, I potentially have to pick it up in local somewhere to be able to make sure that we stay current on where we need to be. English Learners is another program that's growing. In the last 4 years, it's grown about 45.7% in pupil concentration. The funding grows with that, but it's still not enough. We've grown about 63% in the same 4 years in that funding as we work through that. But that program requires IAs and teachers and everything else to continue to meet those needs as well. So we take a look at that as we work through it. I'm gonna let you talk about behavior.
So one challenge that we do need to highlight, and this is probably true for every school situation, but since reopening from COVID, one of the things that we have been dealing with is an increase in student behaviors. We're also seeing an increase in referrals even from the preschool level, so students who are getting ready to come to us from kindergarten. And that's not only an increase in disabilities, it's an increase in speech therapy, and not to go into too much detail, but an increase in students who are coming to us not potty trained in kindergarten. So we are making adjustments to address those challenging behaviors, and you will see on this, you'll see office referrals that are up, out-of-school suspensions that are up, and so on. You'll see some of the key issues that are listed there that we pull from our discipline data. But when you look at the adjustments, and that's really what I want to focus on, how we are trying to respond and meet the needs of our students. We are right now going through some reorganization of our behavior support staff, and that's something that Jennifer Custer is working on with her team. We're looking at employing some very targeted strategies, some of which we've already started doing with school-wide behavior approaches. Summer Scardino has been tremendous in helping with some of the vaping and addiction situations that we're dealing with, which again becomes a discipline matter. We are expanding our partnership with Contegra, and they can provide some more intensive therapy and counseling than our school counselors can handle. And then we are writing grants, such as our school safety grants, to provide training for CPI, to help us with some contract services for some behavior support that's very specialized for students who need that. Some things that are on our radar. And I'll turn this back over to you if you want to step back in. We're just going to kind of tag team here.
When I take a look at charter school, and I'll reiterate, kind of charter school, they take a look and say, what students do we have from Davie County? And we have to give them the equivalent of what you give us for ADM. And so we have to provide it to them. In 23, I believe it's 23, they put some legislation in that said whether it's a brick and mortar or a virtual, we have to give them the same amount. And so that's driven part of the additional cost. So in 4 years, our cost has gone up about 370%, is what I'm forecasting for this year. You'll see right at $26,000 to $121,000 this year as a forecast. So that's one that we watch and understand kind of where we are and we work through that. The other piece, I took a look at the House budget that's just been introduced, and what's the impact for our teachers. I want teachers to get out. I'm not saying I want them to get less. I want them to get everything that they deserve, because they deserve more than what they get. But when you talk about brand new teachers, we pay those locally because we don't get enough state money to pay for them. And so when the base pay goes from $41,000 to $50,000 a year is what's been proposed. You take everything into consideration, it's about $500,000 in incremental cost for just the local teachers that we have. So we need to watch that and understand where we are. To make it a little bit easier, we take a look at what's a BT1 teacher total cost. And we kind of track that to know where we are. You know, over the years, we've been able to pay for 20 or 21 or 22. When I take a look at what they proposed this year in the House budget, that goes down to 13, just over 13 beginning teachers that we can pay for with $1 million. I mean, so that's kind of a stat that we can kind of track year over year to know where we're training and how we're doing. And so the increased local costs for a teacher to go from $41,000 to $50,000 total loaded, except for their supplement, it's about $13,000 total when you take everything into consideration. Voucher is still out there as we take a look at that. They're still forecasting that to be about a $360,000 impact for us in our state funding. And so if we lose that in state, like I said, we've got to figure out where we pick that up. Potentially have to pick it up in our local budget. Questions?
Question about that is, it's their House bill, and they raised so I'm trying to wrap my head around, so they're not fully funding that?
Well, what it is they fund, on their bill, they fund teachers, and then we don't get enough money from the state to cover all of our teachers. And so- teacher positions. And so, right now, I'm paying for 34.8 teachers, FTE.
So they're like paying for an allotted amount,
Right.
but you need more than the allotted amount to
Exactly.
make it work.
And so when you raise your beginning teacher pay, because the vast majority we pay locally, because my positions, I pay for the highest out of my positions, and then I'm left with the local, because from a dollar impact, that's the best benefit for me to maximize my dollars. And so and so that's the reason when we take a look at beginning teachers, whether that's BT 1s, 2s, or 3s, we typically, we'll pick them up
Right.
in local a lot of the time.
But did the House bill, I know at one iteration of it, I saw something about 50, but then I thought I saw something about 48. Not to split hairs, but I'm just curious, didn't they land on 48 on one of those?
I haven't seen the change to 48, they may have, but I haven't seen
But
that.
it was a two-phase process,
Yeah.
increasing one year and then the next year.
Right.
So that-
I mean,
that
yeah,
was-
I've got it. I'm just curious to know. And then, of course, there'll be crossover and tweaks and all that stuff.
So this won't be the one that lands, but they'll have to come up with a conference budget now,
Right.
now that they have both. So, well, actually, all three, including the governor's budget.
And quick one on the vouchers and the charter school funding. Those students are not. This may sound like a dumb question, but they're not in your system. So you're not providing teachers. You're not providing buildings. You're not providing desks for those students, right?
That's correct. They're in another either virtual or brick and mortar building.
Right. Gotcha.
Okay.
I have a question. How much is does the state give you per pupil now? What's that up to?
Probably around $4,500 when you load everything in. I mean, I can get that number for you,
Okay.
exactly what it is, but I think it's right at $4,500. Any questions?
And then one thing about, I don't get too much in the weeds, but certified or classified or whatever the term you use,
I'm getting ready to talk about that.
That's our next page.
that's what I was wondering. So, but that is primarily locally funded, or more so percentage-wise than the other.
The
Classified.
Classified, that's,
Classified.
gotcha, okay. I'll just hold that.
You may have more questions after I cover this slide. So I do want to make sure that as you're thinking about teaching positions, and I do want to make sure the message is clear, we're not saying that we do not want teaching salaries to increase in any shape or fashion. But when Clay is trying to make sure that he is getting the most bang for every buck, we want to put our highest paid teachers into the state allotted positions, because a position is going to cover all of their costs pretty much except for the local supplement that's coming from you guys. So it is smart for our beginning teachers to be paid out of local dollars versus our more expensive teachers to be paid out of local dollars. However, when the state takes that whole teacher salary scale and we raise the floor, we're not doing very much at the ceiling with those experienced teachers, but we're just raising the floor. It's hitting our local budget much more than it's hitting the state budget. Does that make sense?
Can I ask you a quick question? Kind of in regards to that, ADM, relating to Terry's what was your, I know you guys code that at a certain point in the beginning of the year. What was your ADM number this year?
This year's 6019.
6019, okay. What was it last year? So it's approximately the same, right?
It's very close.
Very close,
It's very
yeah.
close, yeah.
So I guess that nets in, because you indicated you lost 57 students to charter, and if you're losing $360,000 in funding to voucher, so you must, if you're losing students to those, you must be gaining students to some level of growth if your ADM's not going down? Or do you include those kids because they're in your district in the ADM?
So when the state takes a look at it and says your ADM is this number, they're looking at what we have for potential students in the county. So that 57 is in that 6019.
Okay. All right. Okay, so in the 6019, you're including all the kids that are voucher funded that you're talking about there, and you're including the kids in the charter. And so they fund you then at your figure $4,500 for those kids too. And then you turn around and, I mean, I'm trying to wrap my,
So when, let me make sure I answer your question appropriately. When we go and take a look at what we're funded by the potential students that we have in the county. And so then they take a look at where we are at the beginning, at month 1 and month 2, to know what the charter difference will be. So they'll go back and take money based on who we have in charters. So the 57 students that you're talking about in charter will eventually come out of what.
they'll pull it back out.
And pull it back out.
Okay.
They're part of the equivalent of that. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So if it's $4,500, we'll come back and I'll get that exact number for you.
They're not
They'll
actually
come back
part
and
of our ADM.
They'll make charter adjustments.
And in regards to our interlocal, first, one question, what year are we in the current interlocal? Huh? Fourth year. Okay, so when we fund you locally, in terms of your formula that you look at and that we've agreed on, are we funding at the 6019? Or do you even address it that way as it relates to how we fund you?
Well, you don't fund by student, you fund by percentage of sales tax,
Okay,
percentage of property tax.
right,
And then I take that number, divide it by DPI's ADM number,
okay,
come back with what I need to pay the charter schools.
okay, all right, gotcha.
So-
So you're sending that back out too?
I'm sending that's what goes to the charter schools.
Okay,
The $360,000 we're talking about from vouchers, that's money that comes off the top that I never get.
okay,
You see,
all right,
does that
gotcha.
make sense? That answer your question?
Yep, oh, absolutely.
And not to complicate this anymore, but that local funding rate does influence the tuition we charge for out-of-county students who apply to come to Davie County schools and are accepted. So that's impacting their tuition, because they're not living here paying taxes here.
And the reason I asked about the year of the contract is, obviously, we want to have discussions about all of the things included here in terms of when we move forward. Yeah.
But in that interlocal, there are some, I'll call them puts and calls, I guess, as far as what, to increase that if the ADM goes over a threshold, and the downside if it goes below. So as we move through in the discussions with that, we need to make sure all this is taken into account.
Well, there's set-asides that come out before, it's just a blanket number for property tax, that kind of stuff, that y'all have as well, so.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll switch gears just a little bit for classified employees and classified salary studies. So I want to begin just by clarifying or reminding you of the difference between certified versus classified employees. So our certified positions are teachers and counselors and media coordinators and reading specialists and all of those folks that have license from the state of North Carolina. Classified positions include school nutrition staff, custodians, bus drivers, instructional assistants we used to call teacher assistants. Generally speaking, these are our lower paid employees, okay? They also happen to be a very high rate of folks who have residence in Davie County. I mean, in general, I think the residence is over 70% for all of our employees, but for our classified, nearly 78% of our classified employees live in Davie County. So when we look at that, and we, of course, have been very concerned about our classified folks, we've seen a higher rate of turnover and transition in those roles, particularly since COVID. When we look at that, 16% of our classified employees are in their final 5 years of their career. So when you think about the experience and the institutional knowledge that's sitting right there, ready to retire, in some cases crossing that threshold into retirement. And then 51% on the other hand are in the first 10 years of their career. So that means they need to grow and learn and be mentored by those with that experience and knowledge. So keep in mind, again, these are some of our lowest paid employees, and they face some financial struggles. And so as you guys deal with the reevaluation and taxes and all of that kind of stuff, we hear from some of our folks, they're concerned about that. These are folks that do not receive a local supplement. Our local supplement is for certified staff only, so I did want to mention that. Now, if you look at numbers, roughly, we have about 850 permanent employees. We have over 1,000 if you consider substitutes and add those into the number, but about 330 of those are classified and about 510 who are certified. And again, those are rough numbers, and if you ask me that number tomorrow, it'll be different than today, depending on who's resigned and who's been hired, but that gives you kind of a rough ballpark. The thing with classified, of course, when we're trying to recruit teachers, we are recruiting against all of the other school systems and schools, private or public, that are around us, and that competition is steep. Not to belittle that, but when we are trying to recruit classified folks, we're recruiting against every industry. Everyone needs custodians, for example. And so that is really a struggle for us to compete and have the pay rate that is competitive in the market as well as in the community. I want to speak to what you've learned about the salary study and how to address that.
Yeah, and we've talked in the past about the cost of the salary study that we did is about $1.5 million for us to be able to introduce what the state has said. These are the ranges, and then be able to put the steps across the ranges and maximize what's available for our staff. I took a look and said, okay, if we could do a 3% increase for everybody, it's about $590,000 for us to be able to do that, just to get our staff up 3% higher than where they are right now.
What's your base hourly wage or your starting hourly wage?
We start at $15 an hour. We have a few that are at 15. Most are at $15.60 or $16.07 is what most of them are.
Okay.
Approximately how many people do you have that make between the base and, say, $18 or so? I don't care about a specific, but is it a reasonable amount of those that don't even make that?
I hate to put a number out there, but I'm gonna say the majority are gonna be $18 or less.
Okay. Reason I ask that is I got a real good friend that was on the school board in a county down east, and they ran into a problem where the county was basically recruiting people with similar positions from the school system because the county's rate for a similar job was significantly higher, and it just kind of, so, that was happening. A couple friends of mine that are on school boards down there. So.
We struggle with that at governmental level, whether it's Davie County, whether it's the state, whatever the case may be. We suffer from the same situation.
I have a quick question too. You mentioned supplement, and I served a term on the school board, but question: is that a common practice in other districts to have a supplement for this level of staff?
For classified
Yes.
staff?
It's across. It's different depending on a district. I know districts that have supplements for classified and certified. I know ones that do them just for part of their classified, not for all of them. So I would hate to say that it's 30%. I don't know that number,
Yeah.
but it's across the board.
Some do, some don't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Would be interesting to have a discussion over that, and to see. at what level you might tier that. We could have discussions about, I think we helped you guys here a couple of years ago increase the supplement for
Thank you.
for
Yes.
that group. And, maybe we could have some level of discussion to help you guys with this, in terms of this group too.
And I have one of my usual off-the-wall ideas, just because y'all know how I love our EC population. I am. Have you, and y'all may have already thought about this, but we have some very high-functioning EC students who, once they leave school, they have nothing to do and have a hard time getting people to take a chance on them to have a job. I can think of, just right off the top of my head, as a good handful that would be able to do some of these jobs, especially in the cafeteria, maybe library assistants and things like that. Does Jennifer look at that and try to incorporate these kids into our school system so they have a job?
We have done that at some level, without going into details or names or anything like that, of course, but we have been able to employ some, particularly in school nutrition.
Yeah.
We do have to be careful that we have a balance, and particularly because we also depend on school nutrition workers to be bus drivers. And in many cases, those employees cannot drive a bus. So that's just the balance that we have to maintain, is, making sure that our buses are rolling, and that struggle is real. We have lots of assistant principals and principals that jump on a bus at this point.
Well, I'm
Just to
sure,
keep
because
things
I'm not
rolling.
going to lie to you, I wouldn't want to drive a bus.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons when I subbed that I wouldn't take a position, because I was like, nope, leave me in the classroom, but don't put me on the bus.
It's a big responsibility, without a doubt. Clay and I both still have our bus license.
I do want to add to that, your question about, we do utilize our OCS students to help and build that knowledge so that they can find work outside of high school. So we do have quite a few that do things through the school day. We have some that come to our office a couple days a week and help, and they're in schools, and they're really, part of them are some of our couriers and everything else. So we do
Yeah.
try and work through that to make sure we've got them prepped to be able to go to work once they graduate.
That's awesome.
And another quick question, and then Brent has a question. In terms of that base starting salary at $15 an hour, in terms of peer counties, how do we, and I'm not talking about Forsyth, I'm not talking about Mecklenburg, even Iredell, peer counties, how does that kind of match up?
We would be in alignment with a lot of the rural counties. You touch on-
For minimum.
For minimums,
Yep.
right. So you talk about urban, we can't even compete in the
Right.
urban area and that kind of stuff. So from a rural perspective, we are in alignment on a minimum, as where they are and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
No, that's the question I asked. Thank you.
I think the concern is the compression that we have within those salary scales, and that there's not a whole lot of increase, or there's not enough increase until you're 20 years in or more. That's
Is that
maximum.
your policy that creates that compression, or is that kind of just the way that works in terms of the state and in terms of how they fund you?
I'll say it's twofold. In the certified world, that you're told if you're a classroom teacher, you're on step 15, this is what you're gonna make. On the classified side, they give you a min and a max. And so then you set your steps up inside of that. And so when the scales were built, years ago, they were not at a point where we maxed out what the max was. And so, we hired all those compressed scales to begin with. And so then when you take somebody that was $11.75 and you move them to $15, now you just moved everybody that got a $3.50 raise.
raise
but-
the floor again.
But
Yeah.
somebody that's at 1501 didn't get anything. And so that's a piece of kind of where we are from that compression standpoint. And so what I want to do is be able to change that and say, if you're 5 years, you've seen a step for every year that's there, that's significant. It's not 2 or 3 cents or whatever the case may be, as we work through what it needs to be from that
And
standpoint.
that's your $5.90?
That's just raising everybody 3% to be able to, a 3% increase to get started on a peer, on a kind of tiered
Tiering.
approach. Huh?
Okay.
So, when we start talking about, I wanna raise the floor to 18, it compounds a little bit of the problem to be able to do that. And so that's the reason I came back with a percentage. At least it gives us somewhere to get started, and then everybody kinda gets the same thing, and we don't get into, why did Brent get something and Mark didn't, or whatever the case may be. Okay?
Sometimes that's a problem you cannot
I know.
Fix.
avoid.
No.
That's across the board. I'm not saying that the
Function.
industry as a
Right.
whole doesn't face
Yeah.
every day, so.
Well, and again, living within our means, which is what we're, what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Keep us all out of trouble and off the news.
Got a question and a couple comments. And one question would be, just to refresh my memory, the people that are classified, what are they in? What component of the retirement system are they in?
What system itself?
Yeah, are they in?
But it-
Yeah.
every employee is in.
So they get funded and all that. So it's like, and I'm not trying to, but it's sometimes that's probably the attraction to working there versus getting paid $21 by somebody that doesn't provide them anything.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's not okay. I just want to make sure. But but
So we see second career folks. We see folks who, retired from other places, and then they're gonna come work in school nutrition to try to build a retirement if they don't have that from their
Right.
first career. But
Yeah.
younger folks, it's much more difficult, because I need those retirement dollars now, because $15 an hour is not enough to live.
the general comment is just that in my previous life as an educator for 11 and a half years, these people a lot of times are the backbone of a school. I know, and there's intangibles that make them important. The fact that we got 77.9 that are people that are putting money in some capacity into our economy, I'd like to see us try to talk about it and figure out ways we can help with this.
Well, at the start of this school year, we had, we always track teacher vacancies, but I've been also trying to track classified vacancies, because again, we're seeing a higher rate of turnover. But when we started this school year, we had 35 or more vacancies in classified positions. So that's a teacher without an assistant, or without, short-staffed on custodians or bus drivers or school nutrition. And so it puts a stretch on all employees. When you talk about them being the backbone, they are. So let's talk a little bit about certified.
Terry has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. But talking about the staffing and the funding, when the state did your salary study, did they take out the urban counties? Or is that just,
The salary study was done by an independent group. The state didn't do the salary study.
I'm sorry, I
The
thought.
salary- Yeah, the state came back and said, these will be your new mins and maxes based on your role. The salary study was actually done by an independent contractor.
We did that in 2021 to try to clean up our process and procedures and steps and get everybody on the most appropriate step, so that they were at least where they should be, and that was equitable. And then to see what we can do financially as we move forward.
Does that answer your question, Terry?
It does, yeah.
But I'd like a little clarification on it. Did the study they do, though, include, when they were comparing and looking at what we needed to do, did it compare us with Forsyth County, Iredell County, Davidson County?
Yeah, lots of
Yeah,
counties.
It was, I want to say it was 7 different districts they took a look at that they had worked in. But when what they took a look at was, where do you have them placed, not on a dollar, but where you have them placed on a grade, because at the time
a
it
grade
was
and a
grade
step.
based. So, they took a look and said, in Forsyth County, we'll say, their custodians are a grade 57. Our custodians are a grade 55. They really need to be a 57 to match what it is, because in 6 of the 7, this is where they fell or whatever. So they didn't talk about salaries to take that urban versus rural piece out.
Because that makes a big difference.
It does.
I mean,
Another question comes to mind. We talked about comparing yourself to some of the rural counties. That question's been asked, but do you know if any of the rural counties have implemented a minimum hourly rate? I mean, you're at 15. Do you know if any of your competitors, or what we would consider direct competitors, at 17 or 18? Any idea?
I can reach out to them to ask exactly where they are. I mean, I'll reach out to the rural ones around us here. and then I'll try and reach out to the eastern part of the state as well, and see if we can just get a cross-section of the state, if that will help. I can't say yes or no.
Right.
But the vast majority are looking at 15 to 16 as their minimum, because that's where where they've said the minimum wage has gotta be, but
Well, if that were the case, then it would be skewing your scale pretty bad, if that's in fact the competition. That's the reason I asked that.
And we appreciate your questions and all of your brainstorming, absolutely. All right, on this next slide, again, staffing has been a big focus, particularly since COVID, and you all know that that has been more challenging since then. The teacher shortage is real, not just in Davie County, but across North Carolina and across the nation. College of Education departments have seen significant reductions in enrollment, and it does not help us that North Carolina is dropping in our rank as far as teaching salaries. When I go to job fairs, it is unbelievable, the competition and the folks from out of state that are coming and poaching our folks to take them other places. So it's difficult. I will say our alternative licensing has increased, and that's as a result of that. So these are folks who didn't initially, at least, go to school to be a teacher. We have about 16 teachers at this point that have some kind of permit to teach, emergency license, limited license, residency license, something. And that number is down from the beginning of the year because some of the folks have finished that process or have been able to convert during the school year. But overall, at this point, I'm thinking about next year. I'm thinking about August and trying to staff. And so, again, trying to be super proactive in what we're doing in hiring certified staff. We have backed up all of our processes so that we start posting and hiring certified positions on March 1st. And that's at least a month or 2 months earlier than we used to because, you know, as they say, the early bird does get the worm. And the personalized communication, the follow-up, the connections, the experiences they have when they come and interview with us makes a huge difference. So at this moment for next year, we have 12 certified vacancies. Again, some of those could change as of today, and 2 of those resignations came in yesterday, so I had to adjust the slide. But we're, in general, in a good place. What I would be concerned about, or I am concerned about, is the late resignations that we have. We can get in a really good spot. We were down to 5 vacancies the last time I checked, and now we're back up to 12. So it's the late resignations that I worry about, and I will be honest with you, most people think that when our next door neighbor has a hiring freeze, that's really good for us, and we're going to get applications. Unfortunately, what happens is about 30 days before school starts, we have resignations when they're then filling their their positions that they've really got to have filled. And that is what leaves us in a really difficult situation right before school starts. Classified positions are listed on here again. We've already talked about those, but a couple of examples. We have lost 2 of our experienced mechanics at the bus garage, and you know our bus garage is fabulous. They are constantly top-notch when it comes to ratings in the state. But that's 47 years of experience walking out the door. And Jeremy Miller's tears were real at the retirement dinner last week. He has 1 replacement at this point, but coming in with little to no experience. So that's a game changer. In the picture that you see kind of faded in the background, we also have lost an electrician in the last week, and that's due to salary. So again, being able to compete for a licensed electrician is really difficult in any trade, as you guys know. So just concerned about that trend. I feel really good about where we are right now with building administrators. We hired a lot of assistant principals last year, I think 6 total, which was really unusual, but we don't have any school administrator vacancies at this point. We do have a mix of seasoned administrators, a couple of ones that just have 1 year in but had good, strong experience as AP, so we're in a good spot when it comes to that. Any questions? Go ahead.
Got just a question about certification.
Okay.
And obviously it's somewhat selfish, but it's global. Is there any talks among the state superintendent or the office about streamlining certifications or getting rid of some of the things? I mean, I know you've got the stuff where people can teach without a license and all that, but you know, if they're good and they've proven themselves, or is any discussions about any restructuring of that, even more than it is right now?
I mean, that's been ongoing as far as discussions are concerned. I will say, from the point that I started in HR in 2019 to where we are now, there are a lot of additional pathways and options, which is why most of the time if we have someone that comes in with a 4-year degree, we're going to start them with a permit to teach. That's good for a year. Then it's emergency license. That's good for a year. Then it's residency license, and that's good for up to 3 years. But we also have limited license. We have folks that we're asking to take a praxis and get provisional license to make things work within our schedule. But there's still a lot of ongoing conversation about how do we get people in the pipeline. More work with apprenticeships, growing our own. We have teaching as a profession in our CTE program at Davie High School. Those students are involved in internships. And we've been working with David Kuntz and Elise Woodridge on, okay, how can we start to build a program so that they are going to the community college, taking advantage of Ignite Davie, working as apprentices, even if they're in instructional assistant roles that we can't fill all of them. Those are usually really good options. So we're trying to figure out how do we fund those apprenticeships.
Yeah, I guess because I got a friend that's got a JD and a PhD in library science, and they decided they wanted to teach. They've already taught college classes. They've already taught Register of Deeds classes. They've already done all this stuff, and then they're going through this program that I don't want to say it's beneath them, but it is in their case beneath them, and they can teach. So it's almost like we don't want to dissuade these people from because of jumping through hoops.
I do understand that the actual decisions on licensure and the directions that people get for what classes you need to take or what you need to complete to get that comes from the state level.
Right.
Not to pass the buck, that's.
Oh, I know.
But we are not the ones that get to look at those and decide.
Jen, do the vacancies that are popping up, are they going to other systems? Are they just changing careers in general, or is it?
As far as certified teachers, we still lose teachers to other systems. We do. It's a variety. It's a variety. I don't see a huge number that completely leave the profession. Our overall attrition rate usually is around 10%. We will lose teachers who will drive across the river for a higher supplement if that happens. Where that really hurts us is when it's seasoned teachers. Folks who have kids in college, and I need to get my salary up, and I want to get my retirement up those last 4 years. That's when we're losing mentors out the door. But at the same time, we are also recruiting and hiring from other districts around us because, again, this is a good place to be. So it's a balance.
And sometimes they come back.
Sometimes they do, or sometimes they say they want to come back. They try. They
Yeah.
want to try to figure that out, and we might not have a spot for them
Right.
in their licensure. But sometimes they come back. We had one that came back this year and took a position completely out of license, out of field, because he did not have a good experience across the river.
Right.
I just want to say this. I know you guys are getting ready to wrap, but I would be very interested to hear from you and work with you to figure out a way to handle this classified issue in terms of, I mean, it's hard to compete with trade positions now with the private sector because these are so demanding. Our partners at the community college know, our EDC meeting here 2 years ago, we had someone come in and they told us that licensed electricians in the state of North Carolina are shrinking. They're not growing. Right. That there's less than, at that time, less than 1 or 2 per county. Mm-hmm. And so I would be willing to work with you, and I think we all would, to help with that in some way, shape, or form with the full knowledge we can't compete right now, but work with supplements, tiering it, experience base, just to try to help you guys in that realm, because you got to keep the buses running. You got to keep the AC going. That you're going into safety here, but those are things that I think, we kind of have to, as Benita said, maybe we can work together to think outside the box a little bit and figure out a way that we can at least incentivize in some way for people to come here, and also incentivize those that are staying with us for 40 years.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'll let you.
Last thing is about safety. We talked about safety last time I was here. I just want to give you an update on where we were. When we were here last time, we had not introduced at the high school yet. We did that on February the 5th. We introduced at the elementary schools on the 5th and 6th of March. So that gives us a total of 19. 18 we approved in November. We had to add another one for the high school to make sure we could cover all their students and everything else. So we actually have 19 in the district right now that we're working, that are working. We introduced the RAVE app. It's up and running now. Thank you, Rodney. I saw him here working with us with 911 to be able to do that. We've actually introduced a drill feature inside that RAVE app, so when we do all of our other drills, we can drill that and make sure it's functioning at appropriately at the time. And so that's really the updates on kind of the safety piece of it as we work through it. Again, our relationship with the first responder groups is phenomenal. They show up when we need them. They're there and everything else. And I want to say thank you to them as well as this commissioner group working with us. We appreciate that.
So as we close, we included the same photo from the last presentation because I just think it speaks to gratitude. These were students who had gathered supplies and materials to send to Western North Carolina after Hurricane Helene. And so that's just what we want to close with, is just a message of gratitude. We want to thank you for allowing us to be here. Obviously, we believe that having strong, well-rounded schools is critical to having a strong community, and we just appreciate your partnership and support. And all the questions and brainstorming, we're certainly open to, so thank you.
I have a couple comments. First of all, I want to thank you for mentioning Summer, because I am just ecstatic of what she's doing and that you have allowed her in the school system to help those kids. I hear nothing but good things about what she's doing, so thank you for that shout out. And because we know, just as in society, behavior is going to just be a continuing factor. So
Adult behavior too, right?
adults and children, it's not gonna change. But anything we can do, and any relationships that can be made, to help that is wonderful. And I do want to say, since you mentioned first responders, I have already spoken to Mr. Kuntz and Mr. Pruitt about this. I hope it's going to be okay, but I'm really concerned that the fire program's leaving the high school and going to advance. I want those children to have the opportunity to get those certifications and become members of the fire service. So I really hope that works, but I wish it would have worked out better at the school. I wish that whole relationship could have stayed together a little bit more, but so.
We'll continue to work on that.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much. We appreciate you guys always. Dr. Belcher, welcome. Okay. Ms. Varner? Okay. And in our book, it's right behind the school system.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to share an update on our community college. The most important update for you is to tell you what we were all doing 1 week ago this morning, and that was our 2025 graduation exercises. We had 1,320 graduates of the community college this year, and that is individuals. Those are individual head counts. They actually earned a total of 1,962 credentials, because some of them earned more than one diploma or certification. But what I really want to share with you is that you're part of that. Thank you for making that happen. Those are 1,320 students who now have a better future in some way. And we know that not all of our students are the same at the community college. Some of them are gaining new skills for a current job. Some of them are going out and getting new jobs. Some of them are transferring to four-year schools. But no matter what, we know that they're in a better position now to be successful in their careers, to support their families, and to help build our workforce. So thank you for everything you do to make that happen. Just wanted to share a little bit of an enrollment update with you. I think you're used to hearing me say that we continue to see enrollment increases at our community college. This spring, for example, on the curriculum side of things, our enrollment was 5.5% higher than last spring. Now, if you take just one semester, that's great, that's just an increase. But we have continued to see these increases constantly year after year. And you've probably heard me say we did not even see any decreases during the pandemic when a lot of colleges were seeing lower enrollment. So we continue to see increases in students coming to us and the need for those classes. I think it's also important to say those increases are across all our programs, curriculum, continuing education, our high school dual enrollment programs. And in fact, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen a 50% increase across our continuing education programs. So the need is there, the interest is there, and we continue to grow in those ways. A couple of specific to Davie numbers to share with you. CCP enrollment, and that's our dual enrollment program for the high schools. That's what most dual enrollment is for us. The state college and career promise program, we had about 200 students this past fall. We think we will exceed 250 of those CCP students for this coming fall. So that is a huge increase that we are really seeing across the state. The CCP program is growing at pretty much all of our colleges as high school students take advantage of those dual enrollment options. And it's great for them because they have the additional opportunities to take classes. They are closer, or sometimes in many cases they even earn an associate's degree before they finish high school. So that is just additional options for them. Ignite Davie, as we all know, continues to be strong. This past year, we had about 135 students currently attending the community college who were Ignite students, but we already have 101 new applications for the fall. So that the strength is obvious, and we just appreciate everyone in the community who has made that happen. As you know, the other big thing we do on the customized training side of things with our business and industry, I've shared this with you before, but some of the Davie companies we work with, Avgall, Liberty Sheds, Amar, Larson, Reeb, Ashley Furniture, Break Bush. Most recently, we spent a lot of time with SBA Home. And customized training, of course, is exactly what it sounds like. It's us building the training programs that businesses are asking us for. Sometimes they're existing businesses who need additional training or new training for their employees. And then very often for us, it's helping new companies develop training programs for the people they're going to hire or ongoing training for their employees. And again, it's very customized to what those individual companies need. I do believe I shared with you in January, we've been this year doing advanced law enforcement training and a new detention officer school with the Davie County Sheriff's Office, and those have been great additions. We're excited about those programs. We are in the middle of $1 million worth of investment from several different grants for EMS equipment. That's in part due to new state regulations, but there's $1 million worth of equipment coming to Davie to be used for the EMS program. And also as part of those regulations, there will be some dedicated EMS space for now at our Davie campus. The Fire Academy is a new dual enrollment program where Davie County high school students are going to be taking classes starting in the fall at the old Advanced Fire Station. So those are all new initiatives that are moving forward this year or to come. A couple things as we move forward, although this is not specific to Davie, I do like to keep you updated on new programs that are available to all of our students. And so radiography is our newest program that begins in the fall on the Davidson campus for now. And of course, what's important about that, it's a great example, especially in the healthcare industry, of how we're responding to what our industry partners are asking us to do. Our local hospitals and other healthcare providers said, we need more radiographers. And so we then went through the process that we go through in community colleges, which is relatively quick, to say, we can get this program up and running. And our class for the fall was immediately full, and we will continue. That process will continue. It might, 2 years from now, It might not be radiography we're asked for, it might be something else, but we are built to respond to those needs. And then, of course, we're still moving forward in our new Health Sciences Center. I have to thank you. I think last month you were very quick to did a quick turnaround on a support letter for us as we applied for some federal money that we were invited to apply for that future building. And it's of course very helpful for them to know the county's support for that. So we appreciate you signing off on that. We don't know anything about that yet, but our federal partners, both on the House and the Senate side, suggested that was a great education and workforce project that would fit with some federal priorities. So we'll keep our fingers crossed about some funding there. We've talked to Brian about our budget needs for 25-26. Really, the increase to our base operating request is nothing out of the ordinary. It's based on salaries and health insurance and just the rising cost of goods. So we've had good conversations with him, and we'll continue to do what we need to do to share that information. Can I answer any questions?
Can you tell me more about the EMS investment? Because as I've said to you in the past, I know there's been times our people have had to go out of the county because the classes they needed were not supplied. So is that what this is geared towards, to try to alleviate that issue?
So I think what you're referring to is an officer class specifically.
Well, that is one specific class that wasn't offered, yes, but I think there have been more in the past few years that we've had to send people in fire and EMS outside of the county that we couldn't get here on the Davidson campus. So I'm just wondering if that's geared towards helping with that.
The only thing I know about is the officer class, I think, where the preference of Davie EMS was to work with a third-party vendor who we don't work with, and so that is why they ended up doing that a different way. I don't know of any equipment or other reasons that we haven't been able to provide those classes, and the equipment grants are, again, they're in response to new state regulations for what equipment has to be in what places. And so that is helping us. Sometimes in the past, because we thought we were being efficient, we would share equipment between the Davidson and the Davie campuses. State regulations don't allow us to do that anymore. So these two grants that are part of that $1 million investment is putting some identical equipment in place, both places, to continue courses that we already do or new classes that we might offer. I think we had, the latest number I saw, I think we had over 300 students this year in fire and EMS classes here in Davie. So I don't know of any other needs we're not being able to meet, but certainly if there is anything we can talk more about that.
And again, as you heard me say, I hope this new partnership with Advance works out. I'm a little apprehensive about it because I feel like with the students having to leave campus, that's always going to be a little bit of a hindrance for them to being able to participate, especially if they don't have their license and aren't able to do transportation. So I really hope that works out. But I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to be watching it because that is very important to me. Our fire service depends on young people getting involved at an early age. So we certainly want them to be encouraged to do so.
Absolutely, as do we.
I have one question, and Brian, I wanted to, you just mentioned something that interests me because I don't really understand it, and I'm not going to ask you to explain it because I don't think this is your issue. I guess my question would be, why would we go to a third-party vendor if our community college partners are offering within the funding that I'm going to assume within the funding that we give them these classes? Am I misinterpreting something there? And I'm not asking you to make a statement on this. I'm just saying I would like to have an answer on that because, we take a position that classes aren't being offered. Well, maybe they are, and we've chosen to take a different avenue on it. So we'll just stop right there on that. Brian, I would ask you to get with our EMS folks and find out why we would go to a third-party vendor versus folks we know and trust, even though they may know and trust them.
And would it have been able to been supplied if it was not that vendor, I guess.
Yeah,
is the real
yeah,
question.
just an
Yeah.
explanation. Now, second question I have is, we are very proud of Ignite Davie. Do you have, and I'm going to assume that has something to do with your increase in students overall. Can you tell me from your experience, how do we match up in terms of Davie County versus counties within your, and I know you got kids coming from all over the state, but maybe around us, are there other programs like that that are helping to funnel students to?
We see a lot of what they generally call college promise programs. I think, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, those became popular. Very few programs are as extensive as Ignite Davie. A lot of the programs out there, they are helping, of course, local high school students get to college, but it doesn't always, sometimes it's more narrow groups of students. It's perhaps either students who only took dual enrollment courses or who only did certain things. Ignite Davie is more comprehensive. And so I think, and of course, as we know, it was much more of a broad community effort than perhaps some other programs out there. So I do think Ignite Davie is still sort of a standout program in that regard. Although, again, I think we do see a lot of efforts in other places to create easier access for those high school students to get to their community colleges.
Well, thank you, and thank you for partnering. I know we had some discussions with the Ignite Davie folks about, perhaps programs that weren't being offered at Davidson Davie, and those are minimal. Those are minimal. So you guys are meeting the needs with your academics too, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you. It's been a great program, and it has certainly been a testament to what can happen when the whole community comes together around something.
The radiography program, how does that, I mean, I don't want to get into all the specifics of it, but does that add something that heretofore most of the kids were going to Forsyth Tech for? Or is it a different?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
And again, we have a great network in our state of community colleges, and if Forsyth Tech supplies something and meets the needs for our area, we're fine with that. Right. We don't start programs just to compete, but we started programs hearing that even though there is a program at Forsyth Tech, we still don't have enough radiographers, right. Our healthcare partners were saying. So that is what we responded to. But yes, most of them were going from this area. If they wanted it, they would go to Forsyth Tech.
Do you have I'm just curious, do you have a statistic because of the important role that community colleges play in, I don't know what the term is, if it's boomerang students or what, students that have gone to a 4-year college, got a degree that, that maybe didn't work out for them, or the changes in the economy, and how is there any?
I don't know. Do we have? So nursing, and of course the teacher discussion from earlier. We have only starting last year, due to a change in state regulations, community colleges were able to start what's called a teacher residency program to help with those teachers who were doing lateral entry, to help solve some of these teacher shortages. But we're seeing in nursing, in those education programs, sometimes we are seeing those 4-year students come back for a different degree, or one that sort of better suits what they're looking for. I failed to thank our board chair, Dr. Bill Steed, who, again, needs no introduction here, but he is here along with our leadership team. So lucky to have them.
Any other questions? Hey, we thank you. Thank you for all y'all do. We really appreciate you. Okay. Now, I guess we're going to let Paul come up. Yeah, let's let Paul come up and do his thing. I think we didn't wait on him, so we're okay. But after Paul, we're going to take a quick break. Okay, so Paul, remember that in the terms of the length of your presentation here. Okay.
Much shorter.
Okay.
Thank you. Had a little containment issue of chlorine at the splash pad this morning, so my apologies for being late. I thought it'd be good to mention our has been working with CTE students with the school system. That has worked out beautifully. We love the interaction that we're having with our students, and we hope that they're learning a tremendous amount about our industry, the different facets of it, and we're getting ready to take on an intern to the DDCC program through a partnership and a grant through Goodwill, and excited for that to get started. So just want to say thank you guys for working with us, and glad that we can help educate more of our industry. So moving on, I have a policy amendment that we have been working on with regard to our alcohol policy. As you'll recall, the initial approval of that policy was in 2021, so this is our first small amendment that we are looking at making. So within the alcohol policy, currently under item G within the policy, the alcohol beverages, this tells you where we can and can't consider alcohol. And one of those provisions was within the stadium. Currently, as the current existing policy reads, that sales could be done in the concession areas inside the gate, but can't filter out into the actual stadium seating area. And what we're doing is a small amendment change that we could look for consideration depending on the special event applicant who submits. That is for amateur, again, going back, let me just kind of read this through. Alcoholic beverages present, sold, or consumed are restricted to the following designated areas. We have the amphitheater, the civic green, the meadow, the west concession stand, excludes stadium track and field seating, and what we've added is for amateur sporting events only.
Paul, can I interrupt you real quick
Yes.
right there?
Yes, sir.
Where is the west concession stand?
So that is the closest to the parking lot. That is not over.
And it is in the stadium.
Correct.
It is in the stadium.
Yes, that's part of the fence.
Yes, it is in the stadium. Does it exclude the other concession stand on the other side of the
It is not properly serviced to be able to do that area as far as selling concessions there until we get it properly.
But it would once you get it renovated.
If it's renovated and we have stadium seating on the other side, not until then. We're leaving that out.
But at this time, you have a concession stand
There is a concession.
inside that stadium that is not excluded from what you're proposing.
Correct. Technically, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So again, what we've added is for amateur sporting events only. And what this means is this allows us a discretion depending on the type of professional production that may come in and want to rent the stadium or rent the park or rent a half-day park. These could be things like certain concerts, certain performing arts, rodeos, could be a showcase, something that has an adult professional production type of application, or things that we would consider that change to be able to take selling inside from the concession stand and being able to go to the stands with it, not on the field. Again, not on the field, not on the track, just the concession stand area and the stands. And the reason why is many times if we do have this consideration, one is to consider what is no different than anybody else that's applying. If it's, let's say, if Catawba College and Mars Hill wanted to come and have a neutral site to play football, that's still considered amateur. One, we take each application, so no matter what the application is, if they've checked that box, we want to have alcohol, we refer to the policy in that regards. So no different than the way we're doing it now. It's just we would be able to consider anything that is a professional production, as well as all the other considerations when it comes to leasing our facilities, whether it comes to insurance, whether it comes to surety bonds or anything like that.
But quick question, on the Catawba, on the situation you just described, in that west concession stand, they would still be able to serve alcohol.
They can. Right now, the only way you can serve alcohol is people would have to stay behind the stadium seating, inside that little gated area. And what this allows is, and again, for professional, this allows for them to be able to sit in the stands to watch a production show. Currently, you can't. We couldn't. We could have alcohol for special provision, but you couldn't go out to the stadium seating area.
And sell it.
No, you can't sell in the stadium seating. You have to sell in the concession stand. It allows for people to be able to consume up into the stands to watch the production show. Again, must have an adult component, adult, professional production, nothing amateur. High school, collegiate, even we have semi-pro football teams. Those would not be considered because we could still consider those amateur. It'd be for major production. But while very small, it gives us the discretion to look at that and consider it based upon, one, they provide us the COI, and if we require any surety type bonds to protect our field.
Paul, let me ask, make sure, when you're talking, we're using interchangeably, amateur, semi-pro and all that. College is considered amateur, I guess. Who knows with NIL, but, so they can't at all do it, or they can?
It wouldn't be at all.
Okay.
To be able to do that.
So Mars Hill versus Catawba, no alcohol, period, no matter what.
Correct.
Professional rodeo, alcohol, but as the policy stands now, they have to stand or sit in this beer garden, if
They
you
have
want to call it
They have
that.
to stand behind. They can't see the production show in the front. Correct.
So that'd be like, okay.
So the way the current policy just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense how it was written. So a small minor amendment change to allow that consideration so that if it's sold, it could be consumed in the stands.
All right. So going the other way,
Sure.
changing this, who are you thinking this is going to apply to? You have an example?
Yeah. So if let's say even if our own team decides to do a major production on the field, then we would be able to sell in the concessions. People come out into the stadium and drink, have a beverage, or consume a beverage. If professional rodeo productions, like an MTV Productions, wants to do a rodeo, and they check that box, that's a professional production. They are sponsored by whether it's Miller Brewing or Anheuser-Busch. They check that box as long as they match the criteria outside of just this policy, but our other rental policies, we would consider them to be able to sell alcohol in the concession stands and people can consume it up front. Otherwise, the current policy reads right now, they could sell it there, but everybody has to stay behind right there at the concession stand. They couldn't go into the stands.
And that's the same for the amphitheater green. Right
Correct.
now, they have to stay in what you call a beer garden
They
area.
have to stay inside, and again, we have to specify that with the ABC. We have to send them every year where the consumable alcohol can be done. So inside the eggshell, where everybody can see the production, they can drink. Anything outside, we tell our officers that if you see any drinking, there's no warning. You gotta go. It's only in because that applies to the ABC laws.
In the eggshell,
Inside the eggshell. Civic green.
So they can have alcohol on that civic green.
In the civic green. Now we're talking two different places. There's stadium and civic green amphitheater.
But when I went to that one concert, people did indeed have alcohol out there sitting at their seat on the grass watching the concert, right?
Yeah, as long as depending on the specified area within the ABC. Yeah. They can have the wing. We can include the wings, but it has to be a specified area. So things that we have to consider. One is the school building next to us, 50 feet. Take that straight line forward from that wall forward. We use that boundary over to the wing, down on the other side where the shelter is. We use that whole section.
Well, I don't really care whether we sell it or not, but but if I'm sitting there, if I did want something, I can't imagine when I was in Cincinnati the other night watching the Reds that if I would have wanted a beer, that I couldn't go back to my seat and watch the game. I mean, just as a matter of pragmatics.
That was the pragmatic thought that didn't make sense, and want to just make that small amendment to be able to, for those professional productions, albeit they may be rare, but we would be able to consider that as long as they meet all the other rental parameters and insurances.
I guess, though, I have another question. I don't really get this, Paul. If you have defined a civic green within the context of the ABC law for your concerts, what's the difference in the West concession stand in the high school stadium if you define the stadium as within the ABC laws that you send in as a proposal for the program? I'm not really understanding why we need to do this.
Sure, we could do that, but based upon our policy, we couldn't define that area as within the stands. So, for example, if the ABC permit was sent in based upon the way our current policy reads, it would be a small blip right in front of the concession stand inside the gated area. Is the only, because based upon how our policy is written, this policy allows us to be able to sell, then also to consume in the stadium. So we'd be able to widen that box to include stadium seating.
So we need to change the policy to say we got the civic green, now we got the civic aluminum.
Yeah, well, it says amphitheater civic green, and right here, West Concession Stand excludes stadium, track, field seating for amateur sports on. So seating is what we're working.
Might be scrolled down so we can see what you're reading.
Right here. So currently, amateur sport, currently it excludes stadium, track, field, and seating. This would take us to be able to include seating within the ABC allowable limits to consume alcohol for amateur, and it still excludes for amateur events only. This would allow us to consider, not always approve, but allow us to consider us to be able to sell and consume not only in that area, but the seating as well.
Any questions there?
And if there's anything outside of today's meeting, if we need to tweak wording, I'd be glad to entertain what that may look like. Again, right now, it's just a small amendment that allows us to move that boundary line over and to consider it for professional production, considering if they match and meet all the other insurance requirements that are noted.
Well, I'm just going to be really transparent with you. I wish we didn't sell alcohol at the community park at all. I don't think that it's necessary. I don't think that it adds anything to the events. I'm really not interested in changing our policy just so a specific event can come here, because I feel like that's why they're coming here instead of going to an arena in the next county that does not allow alcohol sales. So I just don't have an appetite for changing our policy for a specific event. So I will probably not be able to be changed about that. So I just don't think it's necessary for us to bring that into our stadium in order for it to be used by our community.
And the other reason we look at this is to be able to open the door for additional rental opportunities, which is, not only the policy as it currently reads didn't make sense, but this allows us to be able to consider, which also helps our chances to increase revenue production as well.
Well, I think our community park that our citizens have helped pay for should always be 100% family friendly. So that's my reasoning for that.
I understand.
more to this fall?
The only other small change, we changed one word, below. The only other change is changing a wording, in the, insurance to, instead of an entity, the vendor, because it's just a grammatical, change there, so nothing really that makes a big difference, just changing entity to the vendor, which would be, who the alcohol policy applies to.
Okay.
All right.
Any other questions? All right, before Brian comes up, we're gonna take a quick break. 5 minutes or so, depending on the lines. tell her to turn us back on. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started again. And Mr. Barnett.
That agenda really doesn't mean jack squat. Now I'm closing it. You follow what I mean?
Yeah.
There's very little
Kind of in the way.
that's in the way.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I walked out this morning to come to work, one of my boys stopped me and said, "Are you doing a presentation today?" And I said, "Yes." And he told me, "Good luck." So I hope I don't let him down today. But I'm happy to present you guys our recommended budget for fiscal year 25-26. The recommended budget, when you combine all operating funds together, is $113,960,444, with the general fund making up $93,101,922. This budget is presented balanced in accordance with the North Carolina Budget, Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. And in our general fund this year, in order to balance the budget, we are looking at a slight decrease from last year's with $4,735,108. This year in our budget process, we did something a little bit different than we've done in the past. It's actually a little bit different than what I've done with budgets. This year we put together what we called the budget framework, which basically, by definition, was not the manager's recommended budget, but an opportunity to meet with you all as commissioners to show you what was going into the budget, how it was coming together, what items we had. We used the term quite a bit called placeholders because technically at that point it was not a recommended budget. We presented the framework to you all in the middle of April, and then the first part of March we did meet with you all in small groups to go through any questions that you may have had, to get the thoughts you may have. We definitely wanted to make sure that the budget that we met today as a recommended budget, if we were feeling or seeing a consensus from you all as a group, that we wanted to make sure we incorporated those numbers into the budget. So when we presented the budget framework in April, we were sitting with a general fund because most of our conversation did focus on the general fund activity of $92,477,016. After those meetings, the feedback that we received and the general consensus that we took from you all's conversations, we made some additional changes to the budget, and that's how we got to the $93,001,922 recommended budget. So some of those changes, we did increase the countywide fire funding. Typically, whatever funding we tied to the fire departments, we also tied to the rescue squad, so we also increased that amount from what we originally gave you in the middle of April. We did discuss the Lake Louise contribution. We continue that program. There was some discussion to match or to agree to the funding request from our folks, our friends, our partners at Soil and Water and the Watershed, so we did put that back in. We did make, she's moving ahead of me, we did make some changes in order to get the budget balanced, so we did reduce one, yeah, this is why cybersecurity is important. It's surprising. It's I think we can work with the side screen going, but we did make a couple of reductions just to help balance the budget in the end, and then finally internally as staff we looked at our workers comp, property and liability, and we did add a little bit across our various departments just to make sure that we were going to be covered for the fiscal year. So from the numbers that we originally had in the middle of April to where we are presenting today, that's how we got to the differences if you were to go back and look. This was something a little different than we've done in the past. I think it's actually quite beneficial with staff for us to get your input. Some counties, some local governments do this way on the front end before they even have a budget put together as a framework. We decided this year that we were going to try this just due to some timing and some other things that were going on. And we felt like we had a really good conversation within our different groups when looking at the general fund budget. So the biggie this year, what makes this budget obviously uniquely different than prior years, as you know, this was our revaluation year. As part of revaluation, we have to produce a revenue neutral tax rate. When producing that tax rate, we do look at historical audited figures of our assessed valuations to help us calculate what that tax rate from a revenue neutral standpoint is going to be. When doing the calculation, we also throw in the current year actuals for real and personal property and our projected year end for motor vehicles. And what we're trying to do is look at a revenue neutral tax rate that excludes the tax-based growth due to revaluation and allow for natural growth based on historical performance. Basically, in a nutshell, what would we generate had we not had a revaluation? Using the old values, where do we fall historically in line? That's what your revenue neutral tax rate helps you to take a standpoint and look at, because you're going to have new values that change the figures. Revaluation reestablishes a fair and equitable distribution of tax burden amongst the various components in the tax base. What makes one part of this discussion unique is we have to remember that as a county, we have a countywide 4-cent fire tax. That 4-cent fire tax is not part of the revenue neutral calculation. That is, simply put, that is just 4 cent. Whatever 4 cent generates, that's what the tax is for. You don't adjust that for revenue neutral. And then, we get this question asked a bit, do we have to do revaluation? And by general statute 159.11E, we are required at least every 8 years to do a revaluation. Davie County has decided to do it every 4 years. So when we look at the tax rate for next year, we start with our current tax rate, and again, when you do include the 4 cent for fire or you don't include the 4 cent, but from both perspectives, our current rate for property tax is 73.3 per 100. If you do include the fire, that becomes 77.3. For revenue neutral, when looking at the calculation, that tax rate without the fire tax is 59.6 per 100. With the tax rate, it is 63.65. And then for balancing of the budget, we're going to reduce the current tax rate a little bit more than 9 cents from 73 to 64 in order to balance the budget. And if you include the fire tax, that takes it from 77.3 down to 68. So in putting the budget together internally as staff, a couple of things that we were looking at, making sure as we focused on this budget. Number one, we wanted to protect the financial position of Davie County. In the last few years, we've done a lot to move our fund balance percentage up, and we want to maintain that level. We've done a lot to take advantage of opportunities. Recently, we purchased the property for the Ag Center. We've made some internal changes that what we thought would provide us better service than contracting out. And then we've taken advantage where we could and some staffing. So we want to make sure that we protect the county's overall position. Our school folks were here earlier today. I'm sure you've seen on the news across the river, the school system, what they're going through. The last thing we want to be is anywhere in a position like that. So we have to take that in consideration. Some people might say the second bullet point could have been the first one, but we wanted to make sure that we were being respectful of the revaluation process. I know Jamin has presented to you on multiple occasions. We were looking just shy of 40% across the board increases to various properties. So we wanted to make sure we were not putting a budget together trying to take full advantage of that, but do seize upon those opportunities that we are presented when you do a revaluation. Third, our most important asset is our people. I think this budget does a great job in continuing what we started in the current fiscal year to prioritize our recruitment and retention of quality employees. Right now, I know this year alone, this has probably been our best year in terms of filling our vacancies. I know I had a conversation this week with Commissioner Schoaf, and we were discussing what I always call the warm bodies, and that's the number of actual people that we have working at the moment full time, and we're just actually shy of 400 for the first time probably ever. I think part of that is what the steps that we took this fiscal year with our salary step and grade program to help keep those employees and to attract employees, to give us that flexibility. I know with the school system earlier, we talked about competing with other school districts and whether or not they can, offer those competitive salaries, and I think our new system has helped us to do that. We wanted to make sure this budget straightened our technology infrastructure. Everything we do now pretty much is tied to a computer or microchip, the internet in some form of fashion, so we want to make sure that is taken care of. And then finally, especially in a revaluation year, we want to take a look at all of our capital assets. You all know this, every year we have some capital that starts the budget process and doesn't make it to the end. Reval is a good opportunity to take a hard look to see if you have those additional revenues to be able to capture some of those investments in our capital. So I fully anticipate next year, it may not be as large a number compared to this year, but those were the principles that we were looking at when putting together this budget. So when you look at all funds, obviously the general fund being the largest at $93 million. Every fund went up somewhat with the exception of the public utilities fund, which actually slightly less than current year. We did increase the countywide fire fund. Environmental protection is the same as last year. Our E911 fund, we are kind of limited in how we can budget that particular fund based on the E911 board and what they allow us to do, but we did go up ever slightly. Our opioid mitigation fund, and then finally a $6 million employee health fund, and that's how we got to our grand total of $113,960,444. On the general fund, when we look at our revenues, again, property tax is our number one source, followed by sales tax. Sales tax, again, we've hit on this pretty much. We're just not seeing, and we're not going to budget heavily the increases that we saw during COVID and post-COVID. We are seeing somewhat consumer confidence kind of dip right now. We're really hoping with the new administration come next year that's going to pick up. But right now, I'm just not wanting to bank on it. If it comes in better next year, so be it, but we're trying to keep those very conservative. Our other revenues are pretty much along the lines of the conservative nature. Investments on, interest on investment, we actually didn't bump up as much as we have in the past. And then again, the fund balance, the balance out of our budget is just slightly less than the current year. Just from a graphic standpoint, as you can see, how those revenues in the general fund shape up again with property tax being our overwhelming largest source of revenue. So when we look at our focus areas in accordance with our strategic plan, you can see across the different functional groups where the budget is changing. Probably the most significant you're going to see is in safe and healthy community. We had pretty significant increases in terms of capital needs. We made some position changes during the year in EMS, which we carry over into next year. So that's where you'll see the largest jump in terms of year-to-year growth within our functional areas. You can see based on our interlocal agreement, we've added quite a bit in the education realm. Probably the most comforting one is, even though it's still a large number, our debt service did not significantly go up. The Ellis debt rolls off this fiscal year, but we have structured the school debt to ramp up to take that spot to hopefully pay it off sooner. And graphically speaking, the breakdown, the largest part of our general fund budget does fall within our safe and healthy community. That's going to be all your first responders, emergency services, and also a good chunk of our health and human consolidated services sits within that group, followed by our education. This is pretty standard when you look at most counties. Those are going to be typically your largest two areas of funding when you look into a fiscal year. Again, education real quick, just to break that down. Bulk of that money, almost 94%, about 17.9 million is going to Davie County Schools, followed by the request from the community college. This budget does fully fund their request. Obviously, the school system is by interlocal agreement, but it does match the request from the community college, I believe about 992,000.
Excuse me, Robin or Brian, of the 19093, and you may be going to another slide on this. If you are, that's fine. Just move on. How much of that 19093 is debt? Or any of this?
None of that is including debt. I think we have another slide that breaks up
Okay,
debt
all right,
service related
perfect.
to schools, but that's in a separate category.
Perfect, thank you.
Public utilities, like I said earlier, this budget actually is slightly less for 2026 compared to 2025. We did try to really work within our limits on the rate schedule. By policy, we can go up 4% each year, and we really tweaked this budget down to make sure that we stay within that. Keeping in mind that chemical costs are continuing to go up, so we did make some reductions where we could on the capital side. The best part is hopefully next year when we're doing this presentation, we're in our new water treatment plant. Everything right now is on schedule and on budget, so we're real pleased about that. Talking about our capital improvement plan, we tend to every year have at least some type of paving project, and we are looking to continue that. We are looking at a roof replacement at the Brock. This budget does start the process of demoing the old HHS building there across from the old hospital site. And then two projects that we've kind of discussed in prior years at the library. We are looking to finally replace the HVAC unit and to start a better ADA entranceway at the library.
Ryan, I have a question about that. Did we look into the possibility of just expanding that entrance to the back since it's already ADA, or so we were told? I'm not sure after looking at it, but it looks like to me it would be less expensive to add that entrance at the back of the building instead of that where the columns are.
So I can't give you a dollar difference, but what we discussed as staff, it's kind of tricky to say, but the idea of telling someone to go around back, we just thought didn't necessarily, from an ADA standpoint, work as well as reworking that front entranceway.
Well, that might depend on the cost difference.
Yeah.
So if it's a great cost difference.
And I don't think it's going to save us a significant amount of money in the long run when you compare the two, just due to the cost of construction right now. But we did, as staff, consider that idea and are recommending moving forward with working the front entrance.
If you didn't do a cost comparison, you didn't, I mean, if you don't know the difference in the cost, then I mean, that's the main consideration.
I guess my question was do you have to rework the entrance Benita's talking about?
Yeah, that I don't know off the top of my head. but we can get
Otherwise, if you don't, it's a $250,000 savings. Okay.
On the utility side, when it comes to the capital improvement plan, we are looking at a clarifier rebuild at the Coolamy plant. We are looking to replace our P&V. And we are looking at some new water lines on Main Church Road, Yakin Valley, and in Coolamy. And then typically every year we have some type of upgrade to our SCADA system because that's our main technology system that monitors the flows and the chemicals within the plants. On the personnel side, really, truly, when you look at the full year of 2026, we have to stop and go back and look at some of the changes that we made during 2025. During this current year, even though it didn't cost us the full amount, but it will next year, we did add positions in 911. We added positions in EMS. We added in technology solutions. And then we created our ground maintenance crew. So it's only a part of the year this year, but next year it carries over a full year. This budget does recommend a 3% cost of living adjustment. We are going to continue our 1.25 merit performance increase, which is equal to 1 step on our system. We are eating, as a county, the 8% health insurance increase. We are going to continue to offer to employees our wellness center and all our existing benefits. And then any employee that has the employee-only option, the county will continue to cover that at no cost to the employee. From a staff standpoint, when we started this process, our department heads requested 38 new positions. This budget is only recommending 5, 4 in the sheriff's office and 1 in technology solutions. We always put up our fund balance chart. You can see where we ended 2024, just shy of our goal of 25%. That still puts us slightly less than the state average and our population group. Again, philosophically, that's not the worst thing in the world. 25%, I think, is a really good percentage for a county of our size. If it was 15, it might be a different conversation, but counties and groups sitting on 50% fund balance, just philosophically, I don't think that would fly as well here in Davie County. I would say for us, perfect would be 30. But being at 25 is right where we probably should be, given the nature of our size and what we're trying to carry out here in Davie County. I wish the state had updated their system, but they haven't yet, so I can't tell you what the 2024 numbers look like across the state. But I would imagine those percentages haven't changed that much differently since last year. On the water sewer rates, we talked about this earlier, trying to maintain that 4%, which is what you'll see here in the 2026 column. I know Johnny and his staff went through their budget pretty heavily to make sure, in working with Raf Tellis and putting together our rate structure, to make sure that we did have a sufficient rate to get us what we were looking for revenue-wise, but not necessarily having to pass on any additional cost. As part of the plan with the water treatment plant, you do see some years where those percentages go up above 5%, go up above 4% into 4.5 and 5. I can pretty much guarantee you each one of those years we're going to work through this budget trying to make sure we keep those percentages at 4. But from a rate analysis standpoint, you do have to plug in some numbers. But we will look at those years on an individual basis trying to keep that percentage down when it comes to rates. Speaking of our other fees, on the charts you see here, basically everything not highlighted in green is actually a new fee that we are recommending for consideration. And meeting with our departments, looking at the different needs that they're running across and the different situations that they're coming up. They cannot just make a fee. It has to be approved by you all, and then these fees represent situations that have come up to this year that we want to add to the fee schedule. And then on the inspection and residential commercial fees, you all know that we have made a lot of steps in the subdivision development game this year. So we tweaked the fees in inspections and in planning and zoning, pushing more of the fees to the developers. Not necessarily to our residents for permits, but hey, if you're a developer and you want to come develop in Davie County, we're going to charge you for it. And most developers are used to paying that in other counties, so we increase those fees to capture those opportunities if people are coming here trying to develop in Davie County.
Brian, do we have an epidemic of people turning in false fire alarms?
According to Cameron, it happens more than you think. So I can have him explain more about it, but it occurs. I wouldn't sit there and tell you it's going to happen every day, but yes.
Wow, even the 11 and up.
And I'd also tell you, I know Cameron and I didn't talk about this specifically, but I've seen this in other fee schedules. That's pretty standard language to count the number of times.
Wow.
Because a lot of times, Cameron, you correct me if I'm incorrect about this, but if that's happening, they may have some equipment that needs repairing. So that's kind of a way to get them to fix their problem instead of abusing our resources. I mean, sometimes they just have issues, but you can answer that question way better, but.
Yes, ma'am. So to elaborate a little bit more, what we're seeing is a spike, and some of these alarms, depending on the manufacturer, so on and so forth, the date that the alarms were installed, whether or not new systems had to be installed, are producing false alarms. One example is the building the one at CPP Global Drive that is currently vacant. They had a duct detector in there. A technician didn't troubleshoot it correctly. I know Moxville Fire Department had at least 6 different events throughout the night. So when they call us, also in our fee schedule is an after-hours inspection, which is $35 an hour, which is just what we bill them based on the hours that we are out there, so on and so forth. But it doesn't help them mitigate their problem. Even though it's a vacant building and no one's occupying it, by their occupancy, it still has to be monitored, rated to notify the fire department. So when they get that alarm, we always go. So this is a good way for us to mitigate those things and hold these folks accountable to making sure that they get their alarms fixed in the properties so that we can protect their investment.
Okay, so this is more an electronics problem than it is people calling in.
Yes, sir. Just to clarify, this is not going to include, we'll just use example, our schools. If a kid pulls a fire alarm, no, we won't charge them for anything like that. These are troubleshooting issues that someone is not correcting.
Does that encompass long-term care facilities as far as not
Yes.
charging? Okay, cool.
Yes, we would not charge them if someone physically done that. Now, case in point, their alarm systems have to be monitored, tested, and checked annually, just like anyone else's. So if we're continuously receiving a troubleshooting alarm not caused by human hands, then yes, sir, they would be charged accordingly.
So basically, you're saying that, you know, even at Walmart, if somebody pulls the fire alarm, not malicious, you're not worried about that. You're worried about
Correct.
technical issues. Okay,
Correct.
That's good.
Yep.
That's good. Thank you, Cameron.
Thank you, Cameron.
And it's for their own safety too, because if they don't repair that, you know, you kind of get in the mindset, well, there we go again, and what if it is the real thing? So, I mean, it all needs to be operating correctly.
So just a couple of noteworthy items in the budget. When you look at the recommended positions and existing positions, our number of positions now are at 425. We have roughly 139 part-time / hourly staff. We are fully budgeting all of our incentives. We may need to use the money, we may not to, but we are looking at the incentives that we have for economic development, that we have contracts for existing corporations. We are fully budgeting those. You do have a copy in your binder of the revised fee schedule, more detailed than just the new ones. This budget does increase funding for our education partners. This budget does, again, taking advantage of those capital needs, the audio-visual system at senior services. Normally we don't put a single vehicle on the presentation, but I will tell you, if we had to get one vehicle next year, I would love to get a new van for cooperative extension as we send folks all over the state to win programming. You saw the school system earlier today, some winners from here in Davie County. So this budget does include that. We are continuing our contributions to our outside agency funding, especially through our grants program through Recreation and Parks. We are looking at increasing the contracted fire and rescue service funding from, when I got here initially with the county, it was at $135,000 for our smaller fire departments. We moved that to $250,000, and then we went 2 fiscal years in a row of $260,000. This budget does move that $260,000 up to $300,000. In consideration, same inflationary costs and increases that our departments are facing, and then the fact that we didn't change the number for growth in the current year, moving that number to 300, and then our smaller departments, putting the budget number for them at 700,000. So a 300 to 700,000 different or ratio between our smaller departments and our larger departments. And then our 3 out-of-county departments, we did slightly increase their funding I don't know those numbers off the top of my head because they're not the same number, but we also did increase them somewhat. And as you know, most of their funding comes from the counties that they serve, but they do come into Davie. This budget will hopefully get us to the point where we have our new grounds crew fully, we have them fully staffed but fully equipped. We are looking at a remount of one of our ambulances, and then we've had, as you probably may have noticed at the federal level, some changes in funding. Some of those changes do involve grants, specifically in domestic violence, opioids, community paramedic program. We are looking to absorb those grants to keep those programs going. So that is included within this budget. Our next steps, being that this is officially the first day of presenting the budget to the public, we have to go a 10-day waiting period before we can even approve the budget or have a public hearing. That does line up with our next regular scheduled meeting on June 2nd. We would like to go ahead and do that. If we do that, we need to get the notice to the newspaper today or yesterday, today. And then theoretically, technically, before June 30th, once we have the budget public hearing, we could approve the budget at any public meeting, whether it's on June 2nd or whether we look at our June 19th work session, or if we want any specific day within June, we could approve the budget. Would like to take a quick minute to thank all the staff that has helped put together the budget, all the department heads. Want to really thank Brad Blackwelder for putting together all our capital requests and our facilities. I want to thank Johnny Lambert for taking a really good, hard look at utilities and giving us a budget that was slightly less than current year. Yeah, you can't go wrong with that. I want to thank Robin and Cindy for doing all the number crunching through the process. So with that being said, if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
I'm sure there will be, and maybe a comment or two. The one thing I would like to know, because we did not get into that in other slides, is the percentage of the county debt, or just the raw dollar figure that goes back to the schools, debt for the schools. We showed $8 million in debt. Is that 100% of that for the schools? Okay. Yeah, because I think sometimes if we're funding education at 20.53, but we're actually funding it at a higher level than that, including the debt. Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to make sure that folks have a proper picture of that.
So the debt service for the schools for next year is like 5.5 million in round numbers,
Okay.
and for the county, 3 million.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Question would be, right now we're at 396 warm bodies. We're talking about potentially adding 5 positions, which would be 401 warm bodies. What, to get to the 425, what, are they all gonna be hired, or is this budgeted positions, or, because, I mean, that, if I use a pretty conservative figure, that's about $1.5 million in expenditures.
We budget every position that's approved for next year, whether we're able to fill it or not. We always have a certain level of vacancies. It's just a natural progression of any organization, especially if you have 400 employees. At some point in time, you're always going to carry a few, give or take, between retirements, people taking other jobs, people moving. Sometimes, we have separations for other reasons, but yeah, we're always going to carry, and that's pretty standard. And then we have some positions that are just hard to fill, and a couple of those we've been able to fill this year. Hopefully we'll be able to keep them for a long time because of the difficult nature it was to fill them in the first place. So that's kind of where we're sitting. We always bank on those vacancies also to help fall back on the budget at the end of the year as well, which is going to be interesting to see with this year, being that we are a high number. We've opened a lot of positions and we've filled them. And so that is going to have some impact on us financially, but it also makes service delivery a whole lot better once we're able to fill those positions with qualified people.
That number, I guess what I'm saying is, if we spend it, it's probably north of 1.5. If we save every single one of them, it's south of 1.5, or it's a pretty good bit of play when we start talking about fund balances and stuff. So, you know.
Yeah, and then, like, for example, I know one individual in DSS who's probably going to retire. I know two, actually. They're going to retire in adult services who have been with the county for a very long time. So we're going to be too short. We'll probably move some people up to fill some of those roles and then backfill some of the lower positions. So at the same time, in that case, you know, that's a potential savings. But it makes those numbers fluctuate all year long in terms of vacancies and field positions.
So I've mentioned this too. A couple people haven't mentioned it. Everybody here, so I'm just going to do this publicly. To my fellow commissioners, I would really like for us to discuss with Brian possibly at least adding an admin assistant position to the fire marshal's office, because he requested that, and with all of the extra duties and responsibilities that that office have, an admin assistant would be very, very helpful to them, because they're doing the inspections and then all the other duties. And I'd really like for us to talk about adding one of the full-time firefighter positions and doing a full-time employee as opposed to so much part-time work in that department too. I just think that's somebody that's more invested. And also, this budget does not include any monies for the radio replacements or any radio updates, correct?
So it does not include any funding from the volunteer fire side. It does include funding for our standard departments. So there is money in the budget in EMS, fire marshal, and the sheriff's office for their normal radio wear and tear replacement.
But not the potential crisis that we're facing with all the radio issues that could occur in July.
No, it does not include that, because as we discussed, I think that's a bigger conversation before we dedicate any particular funds to that to determine what is the county's role in that conversation.
Well, I would just say in relation to that, I think we have to be really careful, and this is as much our fault as it is anyone else's. A significant part of the change in the budget dollars over the original budget last year and this year are positions that were filled, I'm going to assume, and added mid-budget. And we're now paying the full brunt of those positions. And that's okay. We approved it, and now we're seeing the impact of it more than we did in the partial year. But I think we have to be careful with the capital issues too, such as what Benita's talking about with the radios, that we properly fund this stuff up front and not fund mid-year, and then when we get to the budget next year, we're looking at multi-million dollars increases in the overall budget. So that, again, that's not any one person's fault. It's a team effort, but I think we just have to be careful. We have to be careful with that. Other questions or comments?
Just got a broad statement again on my philosophy about adding positions, and this is not to say you never add positions. This is no reflection on discussions we're going to have about any of the positions that have been suggested not being worthy or not being needed. But we've got to look at, if we are operating at 525 positions, if you compare us to other counties of like size, you're going to find those counties, and I know there's variables. There's variables according to who does the law enforcement, because some places have robust police departments. There's some places that have a different recreational component for quality of life. I get that there's no way to make a true apples to apples, but when you look at similar counties that might have as many as 40 to 60 budgeted positions less, it's just something that I always want us to be cognizant of, because it's not because I want to say no, it's how we take care of who we've got. and I want us to continue to take care of who we got. I want us to retain who we've got, and we've got to be cognizant of that every year because, you know, I tend to think we're on some areas starting to get, you know, what I don't know. We just got to look at it, and we got to protect that because, you know, we're protecting it so we can pay people what they're worth. We want to protect that so we can give them the benefits and create the institutional knowledge and create the incentives to say. So it's not no positions are ever merited. There's a method to what I want us to be cognizant of when we do that.
I'd like to add just a little bit to what you're saying there. Not only do we want to make sure that we keep the employees, good employees that we have now, because we do have excellent employees, and we want to make sure that they're fairly paid, but we also need to look out for the citizens of the county too. We need to, while stuff has gone up in the last 4 years by 40-some% that we're all aware of, people's salaries have just not gone up that much, especially if you're on fixed income or whatever. And I would like to see us continue to be aware to keep our taxes as low as we can possibly keep them while providing the necessary services at a fair price.
Other comments? Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Brent. I know that, Brian, something you sent out to us earlier, and you send us a lot of information, you're transparent, I love it, was that at least one of the group of commissioners you met with had indicated within, and this is my figure, approximate to including the 4 cent with fire, of the 4.35 equitable increase in with reval, that someone had recommended 3 cents plus 1 cent. In other words, maybe would be at about 3.35 total increase, and then 1% set aside for capital. Is that still something that is on the table in your mind?
I guess ultimately to answer that question, it's always on the table if you all are considering it. But in terms of what's presenting in front of you today was simply taking the feedback from you all plus from staff and balancing the budget. So I'm not really sure, based on that suggestion, if the budget that's presented to you today matches that model fully. It does capture more capital. At that time in the conversation, we had not discussed if that additional 1 penny was for specific capital or set aside capital. So I guess there's multiple ways of looking at it. I could probably spin this to you in one way and tell you we're meeting that because of the extra amount of capital that's in there this year, but I can tell you that's not how the conversation went. So,
okay.
But there is more capital this year than in prior years, and again, in a reval year, this is the time to do some of those one-time hits.
Mr. Chairman, I was, I guess, put forward the concept of maybe keeping the penny for up to this point, and I take the point that we need to keep taxes low, but this is the first time in at least 13 years that we've had this problem. Problem being, we've got money, which in the past we haven't had. And my suggestion on the penny was to set it aside, see how we get through this year. And if next year we have a situation, we have more accretion to the fund balance, we can look at it again and maybe have another tax reduction next year. So I do think that keeping a penny set aside for whatever, if it's capital or for just some buffer, if nothing else, to get our fund balance restored, I put that forth, and I think that makes some sense. So.
I tend to agree with Terry on that, and part of that is I go back to my tenure as Register of Deeds, and when we went through some recessions, some contractions, whatever you want to call it, there were several years where things were going up, but we were getting like a 1% increase, and then the insurance would increase, and some of the employees, for example, just after they took their insurance adjustment out, if they paid for a spouse, they didn't have anything. And I don't want us to get back to where we're trying to decide about important life-saving equipment versus taking care of the staff and what we got to weigh out. So, I'm all in favor of keeping, and then, but I'll say at the same time, I'll double down on this, is that if it looks to be excessive, I'll be in favor of rolling it back. But it's a lot harder to not ask for it and then need it and then have to ask a second time. So,
Well, I would also say that, again, we should not, I think 25% fund balance is a good number, because beyond that, I think you're overtaxing your citizens. So I think that's a good number. But we also need to keep in mind that, I hope it doesn't happen, but there is possibility of another black swan event out there. There's another COVID out there. Maybe. Pray not, but there could be. So, again, there's a fine line that we need to walk, not overtaxing our citizens, but also having adequate reserves in the event of a catastrophe. So I think there's some wisdom to that, and we'll look forward to discussing that, I guess, prior to June 2nd. So.
And so, I'm not putting words in your mouth, Terry. I'm just asking a question. In terms of what Terry just proposed, and I think Brent and Bonita and Richard all, if I'm hearing correctly, Terry proposed in his meeting with you what I just explained, not necessarily for capital, but that we're the 3.35 with a penny set aside, whether if you want to dedicate it to capital, you want to, I don't even, almost for savings. But that's not what you're recommending. You're assimilating that full 4 cents, 4.35 into this budget.
In order to balance it, correct.
So, and a penny represents what? Okay, all right.
Yeah, I mean, fiscally, if you added a penny, I don't think necessarily our first response would be to add items back into the budget. It would be to reduce the 4.7 million fund balance appropriation to balance the budget. So that's it might be me. So that's probably what we would do with the penny, unless there was something specifically that you said, if we're going to add it, we're going to put it towards X.
I was just looking at our capital-related items in the current year original budget and next year manager recommended. It's $1.2 million more, so that's more than a penny's worth of extra.
But I would say ultimately, and just to put it on the record, that you all have provided a lot of important feedback in this last month that's gone into putting this budget together. And I would expect between now and the time that we finally come together to vote, there'll be some more feedback, and we'll put it together to have a budget that meets what you want to see for next fiscal year.
Well, in terms of the equivalences, I think, and Robin lets us know this on a monthly basis, we have not increased taxes in Davie County since I've been on the board for operations other than what the county has voted for. The school, yeah. So the reval's opportunity for us to assimilate and fund programs that we might not necessarily be able to look at. I do like what Terry's saying, though, in terms of setting aside, because I can tell you, in my opinion, if we put money back into reserves at the significant level we have over the last 2 budgets, I think 1 year $4 million, and I know a lot of this is ARPA, kind of. 1 million, 1 year $4 million, 1 year $6 million. I personally am coming back for a tax cut. because I think then, at that point, it relates to what Terry said of us getting above that 25%. So I like that idea. I'd like to see how that looks before June 2nd, so we can have that discussion. That's just my personal opinion. Other questions?
Comment regarding cost of living. I've sent out some things to other commissioners. I've done a little bit of research. I've done a little statistical analysis, maybe just a layman's. I'm not purely a statistician, but based on the rate of inflation and based on the fact that if I'm, a higher compensated person, I'm able to buy my groceries much easier than another. So in an effort to not specifically pick winners and losers, and knowing that we've got 50 people out of our workforce that make $40,000 or below, and we've got a median salary of somewhere north of 52 and a mean salary of 57 plus, in an organization that's that size, that we've got some reasonably good salaries within our structure. And I'm not trying to penalize anybody, but I've also lived and had employees that went 3%, 3%, 3% for a, several year period, and higher people went 3%, 3%, 3% for a period, and the raw gap just gets bigger. So just in an isolated case, because inflation's only about 2.73%. Am I right on that, Terry, Mark? I mean, pretty much.
As far as what inflation is now,
Overall inflation.
it's down below 3.
Yeah.
At present.
But it's not reflected in the aggregate cost of what people are paying at the grocery store. So if I make $120,000 a year or $90,000 a year or even $70,000 a year, it's much easier for me. But if I've got a spouse and I've got 2 kids and both of us are making $37,500, it's hitting us because of the, so I'm not addressing relative worth and all that. But with all that being said, my suggestion for this year, not for every year, but for this year, is to take what the 3% would generate and give everybody an identical move of whatever that amount is forward. Nobody passes anybody. You have a little bit of distortion of the higher scales, but I want to put some money in some people's pockets so they're not living paycheck to paycheck. And that's why I'm suggesting it in this case this year more than, I'm not saying it's going to be suggested by me every year, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Comments or thoughts?
Just a clarification, you're not suggesting, Mr. Schoaf, that we increase 3%, an aggregate or incremental 3%. I think that's the word I'm looking for. You're just talking about the way we allocate the current 3% that's.
I'm saying if 3% is $750,000, just for mathematics' sake, that we take that pie and we split it by whatever number of employees. Is that number 425 employees, or is that number 401 employees if we add 5 new employees, or is that 396, whatever that might be?
So just from a clarification sake, the system that we have in place is based on slotted set pay. Every employee has a position grade and a position step that falls on a chart. And on the chart, each step is separated by 1.25%. So mathematically, what you're suggesting would be quite difficult because it would move people on and off the step and chart to where they line up. Now, if you took the money, just an option, you could do a one-time payment. It wouldn't change anybody's base salary, but it wouldn't change your chart either. The chart's designed so when you do a whatever percent increase on your COLA, it changes the whole chart from the bottom to the top.
I don't be terse, but the chart can be reinvented if it has to be. It was invented one time. So, every time we try to solve this problem, whether it be for lower paid employees or helping whatever, there's always a discussion of scale integrity, this and that. And I get all that. But, you know, the raw dollars are the raw dollars. And the basic, poverty, not poverty level, but the cost of living thing is somewhere between probably $39,000, $40,000, $43,000. So, this to me is a way to do it. So I don't say, well, if you make above $100,000, we're not giving you a dime. No, that's not the way I would want to address this. But to me, this is a way to do it, and you don't have people, you don't have the contractions and all that other compactions and all that other stuff when you move people forward.
Brian, what you just said, so you said a one-time payment, so are you thinking it would be easier if we decided to do that, to just do a one-time payment and nobody really gets a raise? They just kind of get a bonus for the year?
That's always an option.
The only thing that concerns me about bonus is I get the premise of a bonus, but you still need to add to your base, because the next year you're back at wherever, and we're having the same discussion. I don't want to have bonus discussions year after year after year.
Did you mention what that figure would be?
What? I don't really
If
know.
you went
It's
out.
according, if it's based on 396, it's like $1,830 or something in that neighborhood. If it's based on obviously the budgeted number, it's going to be different. So it's kind of a fluid type number according to what's pinned down.
Yeah, I think between $1,800 and $1,900 would be I think you'd be close with that.
Other thoughts or comments on that?
Not on that specific issue, but as far as we build up to June 2nd, I guess obviously any questions we have, talk to
Yes.
Mr. Burnett or talk
Well,
amongst ourselves.
So I mean, I'm gonna take whatever you send me and then send it back out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as soon as possible.
Yep.
I know over the next couple of days, we're going to generate thoughts, we're going to generate ideas. And I really appreciate y'all's openness to meeting with us and to taking into account some of the things. I know Benita and I met, we brought up specific ideas and thoughts, and next thing I know, you guys have implemented them, and we really appreciate that. So, but ideas, thoughts we have, let's get them to Brian or Robin, Cindy, as quickly as we possibly can, and we'll move in that direction. Is that your point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I would assume, Brent, we would have to have some level of discussion how we want to implement this, what we want it to look like. That there may be some level, and I don't even know if you guys can punch this in and come up with a figure about what kind of impact we would have over the long term. Whether it's a bonus, obviously there's no impact over the long term, or if there's any impact in terms of retirements, the kind of things that would be added in. I think Brent's kind of thought about those things, and I don't think he sees in his mind, a significant impact. So that would be something I think we would all be interested in hearing, because there is a major difference in a bonus and increasing the base, or in a layman's mind. Terry's a numbers guy, Brent's a good numbers guy, but
I would say this much
yeah,
to that.
please.
I know it would have an impact, but you're also having to work on assumptions that are variable, as like you're working on an assumption that everybody that makes a lot is headed towards retirement, and everybody that makes fairly low is just starting. And there's some truth to that, but it's all over the place. And I would say that when I ran the numbers just to show the point of intersection, or whatever you want to call it, the statistical term for if you did a totally across the board raise, everybody would get more than what they would be getting otherwise, somewhere up to around 63,000, 64,000 or so. So it's not it's not just impacting the people making 35,000. It's, you know, and then after that, it would start being less of a percent of the total. So it's, you know, it's a pretty, and based on what I saw, we've got somewhere around 100 people in our organization that make over $65,000 or right at $65,000. So, you know, given the fact that we got 50 making 40 and below, and we got 100 making 64 or close to 65 and above, it was kind of the reverse of what I was expecting when in a worker bee type organization like what we try to provide for services. That it was, you know, even if it wasn't 100, it wasn't reversed. I was thinking it was going to be a little more like 75 and 75 or something like that. So.
Are you talking about this being a salary increase or
Yeah.
a bonus?
No salary increase.
Because if we do a bonus, doesn't that show us then later, whenever salary study is done, show us falling behind everybody significantly, even though we have been given the bonuses?
Well, that's why I'm suggesting it as a salary increase, because I don't want us to have to revisit that every year. And what your point, well taken, what you're saying.
Any other thoughts or ideas on that? I will say this, and we're all family here, and I know you'll roll your eyes at me, but that I just read a great book. It's called Shoe Dog. It's the story of Nike. And part of what they ran into as an international company, and really even in parts of the United States, was that their idea was to raise. Reagan used to talk about, you know, we raise all ships. Everybody's ship goes up when we increase the base. Everybody goes up. And one of the things that Knight talks about, especially internationally, was that they almost ran him out of countries because his goal was to increase the base employee's salary, not his CEO's. And he said these countries said, no, you cannot come in, especially in Southeast Asia, and you can't come in here and raise that hourly wage guy because everybody else is going to expect more, and there's more of them. So, but what I love about some level of this idea is we have to keep and retain and start with our lower lower hourly wage people so that we raise the boat for everybody. And some of the idea that Brent has here, I think, does that in a good way. Did you tell me what you thought, I think currently at whatever numbers you were, that the average hourly starting wage would be?
For like some of these positions, it's like $17.80 or something, or in that ballpark. And I don't know if there's anything lower than that, but is that, I see a couple head nods, that's.
But what you're looking to do would increase that.
That would increase that probably like 90 cents or more, which may not sound like a lot, but it's.
So that'd put us in the mid 18.5 as a starting wage.
Yeah. I mean, I sit here and I mean, it can be anything statistically can be like Mark Twain said. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. But, you know, I don't just sit around and pick out things arbitrarily. I'm a statistics nerd. I'm not a CPA. I don't have Terry's expertise, nor do I have Robin's expertise. But I do understand proportionality and different things, and I understand philosophically what I'm trying to do here. And, you know, every decision that I make, whether it's saying let's keep our employee size what it is or whatever, is based on how we can make us a better organization. Because this is no disrespect to anybody sitting in this room, but people that we're getting poached potentially from our county are the people making $35,000, $45,000 a year. The people we're not, or maybe more, according to what you're in. They're not coming over here to poach. You know, they weren't coming to poach me as the register of deeds. They're not coming to poach the CFOs. They're not coming to poach people of that realm. You know, so that's nothing said in disrespect. It's just the people we have the potential of losing are the worker bee class. and we need to understand that that's the area, and if we build it from the bottom up, as Mark said, that's what we're really trying to achieve, not trying to punish anybody. Just trying to do better for the organization.
So just out of curiosity, and I am not a numbers person like Terry, but so if you didn't want to revamp the current system, but we wanted everybody to get about that across the board amount, could you just do the percentage wise or the step wise? Like at the bottom you do 4 steps and the top you do 1? I mean, would that be easier or harder?
I think that's gonna lead to compression.
Well, anything's going to lead to compression eventually. That's inevitable. But I'm just trying to think of how you don't have to redo everything. But
Technically, you would have to do away with the system, and whatever amount becomes your salary. So you would no longer be at a position 68, step 4. You would just be a $50,000 salary, just picking numbers. And every position would still have a min and a max, you know. And you know, with our system, we did away with maxes because we had a conversation or two about that. So we still allow all our employees at the max end, if they get their anniversary or their merit, they exceed the max. And we actually had 1 or 2 this year do that. Even after we moved everybody up a grade, down a step, we still had a couple people reach that top this year. So we've gone through that. But in essence, you would just be assigning everybody a salary, and that would just be their salary. So then we would have to go back to
you couldn't do percentage by class? Like just, I mean, and I don't have any idea what that number would look like, but say, you know, like if 68 needed a 5%, but 72 just needed a 1.5. I mean, you couldn't do it by a class, and then it just
That's kind of what we
filter
did.
down.
That's kind of what we did last year. We did different percentages for different decals or whatever,
Get
but
them on the system. Yeah, you can't change. If you change 68, you change 72. You can't get to 72 without 78.
but then I'm just
But you change them different amounts.
No, because they're 1.25 apart, and then each grade is 5% apart. So yeah, so you can do exactly what Commissioner Schoaf is saying, but we'd be on a different system. And again, it just would be assigning everybody a salary.
And I have heard from a lot of different departments that people do really like this, grade step program because they know, oh, when I get my 5-year, I'll be up this many, steps, and when I get my merit, so they kind of can tell what's their number gonna be, what's their salary gonna be.
And even though it's all numbers, it kind of takes the math out of it. Even though math is math, you can see it, you know, people can visually see on the chart exactly where they are and where they're gonna be.
so
Easy for people to, you know, do an increase to say, okay, here's my number on the chart.
okay. Well, we did start from scratch. I'm saying, why can't we move it forward, recalibrate everything, and move on? This is not an every year occurrence. So things can be reset. They re-standardized the SAT. I mean, you know, it's we're not talking about proverbial rocket science here.
I mean, just for context, though, last year, it took us months to get this process in place. I mean, I'm willing to work whatever I need to work, but I don't know that we can get this in place by June 7th.
It wouldn't be a system. It would just be an assigned salary. It'd still allow us to calculate. We could still tell you what the final number is going to be. It just won't be what we have in place today. But I mean, whatever that increase is to the employee's salary would be the employee's new salary. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. No different than some of the other conversations we've had about other items throughout this budget process. You would just be establishing a different way of getting there based on what we already have in place today.
Well, I mean, the only other option I can think of is we do something for a certain level and we raise it, and to hell with compaction. I mean, it's, you know, we can't be fighting this battle of trying to do kind of the right thing, but we're slave to a scale, or we're slave to a way we do that. I've racked my brain on regression equations, splitting the pie different ways, everything else, and, you know, nothing seems to fit right. accept standard percentages. And, you know, so it's like, it's not like we've not explored different ways to do it. And we all know, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the elephant in the room is that you got people that are making below the living wage, and, you know, that's what's trying to be addressed. So I'm open for any suggestion, but I don't want us to just say, well, we'll put it off till next year, or we'll put it off to the year after next, or whatever.
So understanding that, I've got a lot of positive feedback about the system we have now, but understanding it's a tremendous amount of work, and it's not going to happen before June 2nd. I'm just trying to reconcile the comment about we'd be on a new system. If we went back and reset it and redid it, which again, I understand that's a lot of work. I mean, we could do that though. I mean, and when you say we would be on a different system, I'm just trying to reconcile what you're saying there.
We would just go back to the way it was.
Well, no, I don't even, that's the part I don't understand. All you're changing is numbers.
Right.
So whether it's incremental or whether it's not, you're just basically changing the base, and then.
But right now, it's all based on percentages, not numbers. It's based on percentages. If you put
The numbers,
$50,000 in as the lowest paid position as a step one, everything else is based off of percentages there until the highest grade, highest step. That one number controls everything.
see, I hear what you're saying. So what you're saying is, if I'm hearing you correctly, Cindy, that if that base is my figure, not yours, 10%, you drive the whole scale 10%.
Exactly. That's why a 3% COLA, you increase that smallest sale by 3%, and it increases every other sale by 3%.
But you still gotta have and I get that, but you still gotta have a number as your starting point.
You do, but if you say $2,000, every sale goes up by $2,000.
No, it don't have to.
So everybody's salary will go up by $2,000 instead of 3%. You are skewing the whole thing. It's no longer separated by a certain percentage or certain.
Yeah, because the system does not look at the individual or the position itself. The system just has numbers on a chart. So even if you are trying, and Commissioner Schoaf and I talked about this, if you look at those positions that are 40 or below, it's not as if everybody 40 and below is in the same grade. It's grades across a scale. So you can't capture just them and not affect the people at 50,000, at 60,000, all the way up the way the system works. But what I'm saying is, if you want to take the 3%, figure out what that is mathematically, divide that by the number of employees, whether it's 425 or 396, where we're sitting at today, or whatever that figure comes out to be, you would take an individual salary today, add that amount, that's their salary. There wouldn't be a chart. They would just have that new salary. So if they're a $50,000 employee and we do the math and it comes out to be $51,000 or $1,000 more, we're giving everybody a $1,000 bump. That $50,000 employee who fits on the chart today would just be a $51,000 employee hanging out. It's $51,000. There would be no chart.
Well, I mean, I think Terry, help me on this. I think we can recalculate the chart. It may be a lot of work, but it can be recalculated. I mean, you know, I know it's a little more simplistic, but they recalculate the chart every single year for school employees, because that's always the thing about the higher paid aren't, or the lower tenured aren't, but it's just a reality of shifting things upward. And, you know, they're talking about maybe 47, 48,000 for teachers, but that don't mean that everybody else is going to go up that much. I know that's an issue. That's a whole nother topic, but, you know, it can be recalculated because it was recalculated once. So it can be recalculated again. I guess I've thrown a square peg at a round hole is what I've done.
Well, I think you have, but as far as it relates to the budget, if you're talking about, we're still shooting at 3% across the board. If that's 750 or whatever the number is, I don't know that that would hold us up on adopting a budget for 6/30/26.
It wouldn't. You're exactly right.
Yeah.
If at the end of the day, this is the calculation you want us to use, I could take every employee today, run Brent's calculation, and I could tell you their new salary, then we run it against our benefits, and we will tell you for each department what that budget looks like. But we wouldn't have a chart between now and June 30th. But yeah, we could tell you every existing position, how that would fit. If you give me a calculation, I can tell you what somebody's July 1 salary will be. And we can plug it into into our financials and give you a budget.
And let me ask something about make sure I'm understanding this scale thing that we have now is the 1.25 shift. And I'm kind of asking this for the benefit of every commissioner here, just so we're on the same page. The 1.25 shift that's done there is predicated on them getting the merit increase.
No.
Okay.
It just matches up perfectly that our merit increase is tied to one step. We could make a merit increase 2 steps. You could make it 4. I mean, I wouldn't, but I wouldn't recommend it. But each step is 1.25 apart. You could make, when we created the system, we talked about 1% apart, 1.5, 2, but we landed on 1.25, so it would give us incremental steps.
So the only thing that affects, I guess what I'm saying, we got that, but everybody don't get the merit increase.
No.
But the step adjustment or the overall scale adjustment is simply based on what we land on as a percentage to funnel out through the whole system.
Correct. Right now, if you took the 3% that's recommended in the budget, you would take the lowest step grade at the very top, and you would increase it 3%. That is a grade 61, step 1. And then it goes all the way down to step 40 at a 1.25% increase. And then across the top, to go from a 61 to a 62 is a 5% change. So whatever that new number is, then changes by 5% to give you grade 62. And you go through the same model all the way up to grade 88. And then in theory, we have a grade above 40 if somebody were to reach that mark. Excuse me, a step above 40.
I'm going to present an idea here in just a second as we move forward. Not about Brent's proposal. Any other questions? Any thoughts or ideas? Okay, now, we maybe a year ago, set aside a little subcommittee we have on our board of Brent and Terry to look at personnel issues, things of this very nature that we're talking about. I would like to recommend, and I know this guy's busy with corporate taxes, that kind of thing, but I would like to recommend that really very quickly that you guys maybe meet with Brian and have a discussion over this heading into the next week or so, and then you guys can report back to us, or we can talk about this. We could have 2-on-2s again prior to June 2nd. I just don't think we have enough time here today to go over all of this in an efficient and effective way. And of course, we're bound, by law to have, and we want to be open, we want to be transparent, but I think you guys maybe could have a better discussion over this than maybe we can have right here. So I would just say, hey, let's do that, and then we'll keep, the rest of us will stay in the loop, and then Brian, you guys talk about it, and if we want to do 2-on-2s to kind of have an explanation, then we'll do that. Okay, is that okay? Brent, you okay? Terry, you okay with that? I know you're busy.
No, I mean, everybody's busy. I'm fine with that. My only question is, though, back to what I've already said, I don't see that this exercise should hold us up on our budget.
I don't think we change anything on those timelines. I think y'all begin to have discussion about how we implement in terms of where we go outside of that. There's no dollar figure changes on what Brent has recommended in this budget.
Depends on how it's implemented.
Yeah.
though, Right?
Department by department, it would change,
Yeah.
Well,
but in total.
But as far as the general fund, it's not gonna matter. I mean, it's a total.
Not in, you're 93,001,992, you're not gonna see much difference depending on which way you go about it. You will, depending on the size of the department and who's in the department, how people may fall, but your grand total shouldn't change.
y'all set up the time to have that meeting, and then but we're not gonna change any timelines. We'll keep rolling, at this point. Now, I'm not gonna say we might. We have had to have special call meetings right before June 30th, especially when the state delays. So, we can certainly work with that if we have to, okay? Brian, did you have anything else?
Not unless you guys have anything.
All right. Pending action items.
We don't have any.
All right. Any other discussion? Any issues? Okay. All right. Commissioner comments. Richard?
I'd just like to say thank you to everybody that came out today, especially the county staff that has worked so diligently on getting us a budget turned out. All the county employees I see up and down the roads doing their jobs and with smiles on their faces and whistling while they worked. But I think we have a great group of employees here in the county. And I would like to say too that we talked a while ago, we heard from the school system about people leaving the last 4 years wanting to get their salaries higher so they can get their retirement higher. But you know, Davie County has always, and my mother was a school teacher, and I was pretty well in touch with all the other school teachers around. There were people that stayed here in Davie County and do stay today just because Davie County is such a great place to be and work. And a lot of those people that have left us from time to time to go to higher salaries somewhere else, from the health department, social services, health and social services now, actually came back because we had such a great place to live and work. And I think our board and the boards before us were part of that, and I'd like to say thanks to all of you for your participation and your part in that as well. And come back next month.
Terry.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone staying here. I think everyone I see out there except one person is an employee. And I've said this before, and I believe this with all my heart. The employees of the county are our biggest asset, or certainly top two in Davie County. And so working through this, we take it very seriously. And if you have any input, please reach out to one of us and let your feelings be known. But I do appreciate all the work, and I appreciate your attendance, and hope to see you June 2nd.
Thanks, Terry. Brent?
Just reiterate what everybody else has said. We appreciate you. I hope you know with all this discussion that we have, that we appreciate the county employees, and that in a service economy especially, you are indeed the backbone of how we operate.
Ms. Benita?
I just want to say to Commissioner Schoaf, I appreciate your passion on this subject. We share this idea, and I really appreciate all the work that you've done on this. Thank you all for being here. If you don't know, tomorrow, Davie County will be celebrating the North Carolina Soil and Water Conservation North Carolina Farm Family of the Year, which is from Davie County. Craig and Jessica Myers have been chosen as the North Carolina Farm Family of the Year, and I think that's awesome for our little county to have that recognition, and I'm looking forward to their celebration tomorrow. And Mayor Brandon, thank you for being here with us today. So thank y'all.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you. I hope you understand that this is a group of commissioners here that have ideas and thoughts, and they do not mind communicating them. And it's really, I find it to be invigorating because Brian and Robin and Cindy, especially in this budget issue, have been very open to listen. And I have no doubts, whatever this board comes up with, they will implement it and do it to the best of their ability, as you all do, to make Davie County a great place to live. So we thank you, and we will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Ms. Finney, do I have a second? Richard? And all in favor? All right, we stand adjourned. Thanks, guys.